We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I am, in fact, here this week and feeling better than I was last week. So, Tom,
all right,
didn't
you don't have
jinx
the plague
me.
anymore.
Yep, the reverse jinx. It was all right. We made it through okay. Other things have not necessarily made it through okay. Somebody's
I don't remember
upset
anything interesting happening in the last week at all.
Somebody's upset that I start most podcasts these days with mentions of such things, but we'll get to that. We're actually going to include that as a question, so that's coming up later. Tom and I are both having potential computer problems, so we'll see if this episode ever actually makes it out to air or not. Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? What microphone is this thing on? Is it?
I don't know. You sound okay on my end, but I don't know if that's what you're recording.
Who knows?
Yes, also who knows?
Not me.
We don't know much.
Yes.
We know less now than we did before. I think that's how I'm feeling.
Yeah, that's true. It's raining here in Florida, which is unusual for the winter. We usually have dry winters and wet summers. It's also my son's school in Tallahassee got canceled for today and tomorrow because it's going to snow. And they do not know what to do with themselves up there. It's like everybody stay home.
Wait, it hasn't snowed yet and they canceled school preemptively?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I think, he said yes. It's supposed to snow today or tonight, and they canceled it for today and tomorrow.
Wow. That is a major difference from anywhere in Canada, that's for sure.
Well,
even where it's very mild here.
Yes, and it's not going to. Who knows how much snow it's going to be? I don't know. I'm not watching the weather, but it is definitely going to be more snow than they're used to. I think my other son looked it up, and he said that the last time it snowed anywhere in Florida was like 2018.
Right? Yeah.
When I was in Jacksonville, it snowed once.
Everywhere else in Canada always makes fun of Vancouver because they're like, oh, when it snows for you guys, you get all freaked out and nobody can drive in Vancouver. I'm like, it's true because we're not nearly as prepared as most other Canadian cities for when it actually snows here because it doesn't snow here very frequently. That preemptively canceling school before it's actually even hit the ground, that's something.
Yeah, I don't quite understand that. I'll be honest with you.
Because it might not happen. It might not actually snow. Yeah. That's the thing.
But in all honesty, you definitely don't want people driving. You don't want to make people drive to work. I'm not worried about the students who live on campus. They're going to be walking around and they probably wearing flip-flops anyways. Yeah. But they, you definitely want them driving because Floridians can't drive in the rain. I mean, it is. And if it's foggy, it is. You might as well just close your eyes and point yourself in the direction and wait till Google tells you to get back on the road or whatever, because you've got no chance. They have no idea how to drive. I grew up in the fog, in the Central Valley of California, and all winter long, if not most days period. In the evening, the fog would roll in over the Altamont Pass from San Francisco and just drop down in the Central Valley, just sit there all night. Pea soup stuff. Driving in the fog was just how you got around most of the time. But you would think that they would know how to drive in the rain here because it rains here quite frequently, but they don't.
You have storm drains. Like I've heard of the cities where they don't even have storm drains on the roads because it just rains so infrequently and definitely never snows. But you have storm drains in Florida for sure.
You would be shocked how well we are adept at moving water off of streets, and yet still people slam on their brakes, put on their hazard lights, and drive 25 miles an hour on the highway. I'm like, what is your problem? It is not even raining that bad. I mean, it does rain really hard sometimes, and we even get hail and all that other stuff every once in a while, but it rains all the time, and just a little bit of rain is not a reason to put your hazard lights on and drive 20 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not a reason to put your hazard lights on. I think that's illegal, by the way. I don't think you're supposed to do that, period. There's like signs that say, rain, hazards off, lights on. Because they definitely have their hazards on and their lights off. Because why would you turn your lights on? But it's... I just don't understand Florida. I don't understand it at all. Like, how do you people not know how to drive in the wind rain? It just doesn't make any sense.
This is what we're going to say because we We don't even want to get into the bigger events that have taken place this past week.
Nothing's happened this week. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What did you watch, Rob? I didn't watch anything.
Yeah, you didn't watch anything for another week. This is
another week.
A light section for Tom, and it's a light section for me too this week. But I did watch one movie. I had started a second movie, but didn't finish it, so I didn't think it was fair to put it on the list and give any sort of review of it. But I just felt like watching something lighthearted and inconsequential and let me escape for about an hour and a half. So I put on Sonic the Hedgehog from 2020, the newly animated version, computer animated version, because there was a Sonic the Hedgehog movie back in the 90s, I think.
Was there?
Yeah.
I must have missed that.
But yeah, this is Sonic the Hedgehog, which rather infamously had the whole, when the first teasers came out, there was the original computer animated version of Sonic that everyone absolutely hated, with his human looking teeth and his weird design that didn't look like the video game character, but actually became critically important to the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers movie that they brought out that was very akin to like Roger Rabbit style, and the old version of Sonic the Hedgehog that was never actually used in the movie was a surprisingly important character in Chip and Dale. So I got a big old kick out of that. Stuff. You don't know any of that stuff?
I don't know any of this stuff. I do know that when everybody was so mad about Sonic, I was like, what are you mad about? I don't quite understand. Like, why are we upset about this?
He was ugly and he didn't look like the video game character, so people were
who
like,
who cares? It's not. It was a live action thing. Who cares what he looks like? People get really hung up on weird stuff.
And I also have a strong suspicion that they never actually intended to release the movie with that version of Sonic, because it did not take them very long to completely replace the Sonic the Hedgehog character model for the entire movie. Because, I mean, the updated version came out like just months after those original teasers, and I'm like, there's no way they actually had time to redesign the character. And because it's not quite as simple as you just drop the new character model on the existing animation. You would have to tweak the animation for the different proportion sizes of the original model versus the model they ended up using. So I think that was all a surprisingly calculated move to just get like way more press and interest in it, because they very quickly replaced the model with one that everybody liked. So all of that conspiracy theory aside, Sonic the Hedgehog from 2020 was a lighthearted, inconsequential, fun movie, and it was exactly what I wanted to watch this week. So I had a very pleasant time watching this movie. Is it the best movie ever? Is it completely original in any way? Nope, none of that.
I remember it being okay. I saw it. I remember it being fine.
It's absolutely fine. I think it's fairly equivalent to the Super Mario Brothers movie in that way, in that it's very inoffensive, but it's entertaining, and it's lighthearted, and it's nice, and it's a fun time, and you can watch it with anybody, and yeah, it's good. I also think it was a better Flash movie than The Flash. I thought his speed effects and that were done better than the actual Flash movie. So it was pretty good. It's pretty good animation that way.
I continue to think that the best speedster stuff that ever was done was in the X-Men.
Yeah,
movies.
Quicksilver, and they pretty much aped that as well twice in Sonic the Hedgehog. They did those type of Quicksilver scenes twice in this movie because it was a hit.
It's almost worth watching those movies, which are mostly universally bad, just to see him. You know?
Oh, the X-Men movies?
Yeah.
They're not really universally bad.
No, I don't remember which ones he's in.
Yeah.
Which X-Men movies are pretty... Okay, let's not get into that. All right. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole.
Jim Carrey is here. This is now apparently the only movie franchise he has any interest in being in anymore, because Jim Carrey said he was going to retire, but he came back for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and he's like, yeah, I actually enjoy doing these movies. I think the scripts are pretty good, and he's happy to have something that his kids can watch. So I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, and he's having a blast in there. He's having a lot of fun doing his Jim Carrey stuff, and so that's great. If he's enjoying it and clearly making a good paycheck on it. So yeah, the second movie that I was intending to watch was Sonic the Hedgehog 2 from 2022, which I did start, and I really enjoyed the way it started, because they're just like, yeah, this is absolutely 100% a continuation from the first movie. They weren't trying to do any kind of, like it was a straight through line. You could watch those movies back to back and they would 100% fit. Just remove the credits and just keep on going, and it's like one continuous story. So I kind of enjoyed that, and yeah, there we go. I give it a thumbs up. It's not going to change your life, but it'll distract you for an hour and a half, and sometimes we need that.
There you go. Yeah, I didn't watch anything again.
Yeah.
My son moved out. One of my sons moved out.
Okay.
So we have the one up in Tallahassee, and the other one needed to move out this weekend to get closer to college. So he found his first off-campus apartment, and we helped him move into that. And my youngest son was off camping with the Boy Scouts. There was a lot of stuff going on. So we were very distracted and busy and did not pay attention to anything that was happening in the world.
Was there anything house-wise that's worth repeating on the podcast?
Not really.
Okay.
No, we're not really. In fact, I just got an email during this recording session about a meeting that we have to have with the city, which will determine almost definitively what our course of action will be, I think.
I'm guessing it'll be a Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m. Yeah.
My wife has started to make that joke, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So it's going to rain all day today, and we just moved my son into his apartment, and which is off campus, but close. It's like a block away, or a block away from the edge of campus.
Okay.
And I think he said he skateboarded into his class the other day, and it took him like 20 minutes, so 15, 20 minutes. So it's close, but it's raining. And so we called him last night and said, hey, so how's it going? How's everything going? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, it's going all right. I'm like, do you have a jacket? Like a rain jacket? He's like, no. I'm like, so what do you have? He goes, I have a hoodie, and I have this leather jacket. I'm like, well, you can't. The leather jacket's suede, and we got it at a used, like a Salvation Army place or something like that for a costume he wore one time.
Okay.
But he was very little at the time. He's grown into it, which is hilarious because he's had the suede jacket. He never wears it because it's always too hot here. He's had the suede jacket forever. I'm like, you can't put that in the rain. It'll ruin it. Yeah. You can't wear that. So I'm like, what are you going to do? He's like, oh. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, maybe I can come up there after, sometime tomorrow because I don't work today. And my wife said, yeah, as long as it's between 10 and 12, he'll be available. And my son's like, okay, I'll see what I can do. I'm like, no, she is joking. That is our podcast time. And she's been making this joke now. So everything happens. I'm sitting here watching outside, just waiting for somebody to knock on the door for the dog to freak out. Yeah. It should happen sometime. Give us a second. Anyways, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to our website. You find our episodes, our audio, the show notes, the links to anything that we may talk about, any products or articles, and a link to our Flickr album so you can follow along with the pictures that we're talking about. You can go to facebook.com/AVRant podcast, youtube.com/AVRant, where you'll see our live recording sessions. I don't know, how bad are our lips desync these days?
Oh, the lip sync isn't too bad at all. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah,
okay. Well,
all right.
There you go. The pictures will be embedded there. You can throw it on in the background. And then when we mention an image, you can look over.
That's right.
Change tabs or whatever. And it's just like listening to a podcast, except on YouTube.
That it is.
Then you can go and not pay any attention to the comments there because I'm sure they're awful. Contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His socials is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. I'm not doing socials anymore.
And if you are looking for me and wondering why there's no response at most places, I'm pretty much only at Blue Sky now, and I'm not very much there. So that's
I think I signed up for Blue Sky. I don't remember. Everybody's like, "Oh, this is going to be the next whatever," and then I just have done that like 10 times. So I've got accounts places that I'm never going to open up again, and I just don't care. So I'm not doing it. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sending us a PayPal donation. Or you can go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast to become a monthly contributor. They'll take some money from you and give most of it to us. So that I think it's a minimum of $1. So I guess we should thank all of our patrons. We have 132 patrons currently.
That is right. Yeah, that is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So yeah, big thanks to our 132 patrons holding strong over there.
So we've got, if you can't support us financially or whatever, just that we understand. We don't ever require that or ask that, or we don't put anything behind
it.
It
is
paywall.
A free podcast, and
yes.
Whatever ads you see on YouTube are only what is strictly required in order for us to post a 2-hour-long thing on there, because you can't post something that long unless they automatically insert some ads. But I put in the minimum amount we're allowed, so we're not making any money over on YouTube, that's for sure.
That's for sure, with all those views. So Ilango gave me permission to use his photos on AV Gadgets, which will start up again soon.
Okay, yay!
I need a monitor. And then since my son moved out this weekend, my wife's computer is now set up, which is important because good. She does all the financial stuff. Mm-hmm. We are woefully behind and probably great amount of debt. Who knows? So once I get AV Gadgets going again, I'll use those pictures. Ilango, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilango, for giving that permission.
And we also got a note of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Bret, who's a first gen, a V1.
Yeah.
2-hour plus club member.
Version 1.0.
Infinite Gary, who says, yes, AMF Bowling is a brand that makes bowling equipment and operates many bowling centers. I think I said something about that last week.
That's what it was, the IAMF from Google and Samsung. So that's right. Where that came from.
Henry, Scott, Ilango, and Anonymous.
Yes.
That's not the hacker group. That's just somebody who doesn't want us to mention their name.
That is how they signed it. Their name was present in the email heading, but they signed it anonymous. So I'm perfectly fine going with that. I will refer to anybody by whatever moniker they want to go by. So I'll repeat the names of people who sent in these notes. Bret, Infinite Gary, Henry, Scott, Ilango, and Anonymous. Thank you all very, very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. We definitely appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
So before we start the news, am I supposed to read this first line?
No, that was a reminder to me that I just forgot to erase there.
All right, you leave it there. It doesn't matter. I scrolled past it already. I already scrolled past it. It's gone. So in the news, after many, many leaks, Nintendo went ahead and posted the official teaser video to announce the successor to the Switch called Switch 2.
At least they are not going to confuse people. This is not a peripheral for the original Switch, the way the Wii U name confused people when that came out. So it's Switch 2. It's very clear. This is the successor to the Nintendo Switch. Yeah, no confusion there.
And it will, in fact, arrive sometime in 2025. It might be the last day of 2025. It could be tomorrow. Who knows? The teaser videos...
We're pretty sure that it's not going to be for the next few months for one of the things we're going to mention. Yeah.
All right. The teaser video said that more details will be revealed on April 2nd.
So it's not coming out before then, I wouldn't imagine.
I would imagine not. What we know for sure is that from the teaser video is that the Switch 2 has a larger screen. It's physically larger overall. That goes for the new Joy-Con controllers as well. They're a bit bigger. And they no longer slide onto the sides of the Switch 2 control console using rails. Instead, they insert into the sides and are held in place with magnets. That's going to end well. Everything is black in color except for little bits of blue and orange highlights under the thumbsticks and along the edges, controller edges. When the Joy-Con are removed, there's a U-shaped kickstand that spans the full width of the console. There are 2 USB ports, top and bottom, and there's still a headphone jack. And Nintendo has confirmed that Switch 2 is backwards compatible with both physical and downloaded Switch games, with few exceptions, which are probably things like Labo and Ring Fit Adventure that use peripherals that can only physically fit the smaller original Switch Joy-Cons.
Yeah, some people were a little bit worried when there was the asterisk, and they're like, there's some games that might not be supported. I'm like, no, don't worry. Almost everything will work. It's going to be like Labo that physically can't work, so that's going to be...
I don't know what Labo is. Yeah, I don't remember that.
They have to put in the asterisk, otherwise somebody's going to complain. But yeah, don't worry. It's going to play almost everything that your original Switch could play.
All right. Nintendo didn't say the price or what the new specs are, so is there anything that's actually new about the Switch 2? Well, they weren't explicit, but it appears that both Joy-Cons have small optical sensors in their edges, and the teaser video showed them sliding along those edges like mice. So it seems to be the new innovative feature that the Switch cannot offer. I have no idea what that sentence meant. What does that mean?
It means take a Joy-Con, either Joy-Con, off of the Switch 2 and hold it with the colored edge facing a desk or your leg or whatever, and you'll be able to use it like an optical mouse. That's what that is. So you might be able to have like mouse aiming for first-person shooters. It's not out of the question. Maybe this is what Metro Prime 4 will make use of. Or if you have a Mario Maker, or they're thinking like maybe the new Mario Kart will have like a track editor, something along those lines. You'll be able to use this thing like a mouse, more precision.
Right. Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Now I'm thinking about it. You hold the thumbstick in one hand, and then it has a clicker, right?
It's got the shoulder button, so the shoulder button becomes your click.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't hate that idea. I think that sounds pretty neat.
Yeah, why not? Obviously, it's not going to be every single game making use of it, but I think it's going to be used perhaps more than the IR sensor that was built into that original Switch that only 1-2 Switch ever made use of. There might have been like 2 other games that ever made use of that IR sensor, which seems to be missing on the new Joy-Con for the Switch 2, so maybe that's another title that won't be fully supported in backwards compatibility because they don't have the IR sensor.
I honestly did not know there's an IR sensor on that thing.
It's only on the right Joy-Con for the Switch, and on the bottom there's a little IR sensor there that I think it was grand total of 3 games ever made use of. So they might not work on the Switch 2. You've been warned.
All right. The only new game that was hinted at is a new Mario Kart, which is, I don't think they have to hint at that.
Not
we know it's coming.
Exactly shocking. Yeah.
All right, last week, Patrick Spence, the longtime CEO of Sonos, was finally ousted following the poor sales numbers of the new Sonos Ace headphones and the damage to Sonos' reputation from the buggy release of the new firmware and app. He will technically remain in an advisory role until the end of June, and he'll receive a $1.875 million severance, which seems, whenever I get fired from a job, they often hand me a sack of money and say, you know what, you can stick around if you like. Because that's how the world works for everybody. Not
you were
just
there to make the top level decisions, and you made some very poor top level decisions. Now, look, I'm never going to blame somebody who tried something and it turned out poorly. That could happen to anybody. It's happened to Nintendo in the past, right? That Wii U was a failure. The Virtual Boy was a failure. They've had more hits than misses, but sometimes you swing a little bit too far, or you swing and you hit a foul ball, and it doesn't always work out. But it would be pretty nice that when you make a decision that costs millions of dollars, and when you fire a whole bunch of staff members before you leave in order to try and turn things around, and none of that works, that you still get to leave with almost $2 million. Pretty good deal.
I wish somebody would just give me $2 million. You could hire me and then fire me immediately and hand me $2 million, and I think I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, you just got to start your own meme coin, which
apparently that's the thing to do.
The whole wasn't calling meme coins like to denigrate them. That was the term, was to denigrate them and indicate how worthless they were by calling them a meme coin, and now they're just proudly saying, here's my new meme coin? Very weird.
I tell you, the people that I am friends with on Facebook, which is a dwindling population, who were all like admonishing all of us for making fun of Bitcoin. They've been kind of silent lately.
Bitcoin wasn't a meme coin. Bitcoin originally was trying to do a thing legitimately, and
I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea. I don't know that it's the greatest idea or that it's the idea that we're going to all end up with, but it's certainly. I think it was certainly an idea worth trying, and maybe they'll stick around forever. I don't know. It certainly does not. It's
really fully... has not become a currency.
Yes,
that part of the idea has not worked out. In reality, it is not a currency. It is but I'm still waiting for that Ethereum change over to the proof of work. That's only been promised for many, many, many years now. Just coming any day, right around the corner.
I still don't know what we're talking about. Board member Tom Conrad has been put in place as interim CEO. He was previously the chief product officer at Quibi.
Quick Bites. You remember Quibi? That wonderful service where you were going to have 2 versions of everything that you watched, one for vertical, one for horizontal, and it was absolutely going to take over the world. And then they launched right at the pandemic hit, and there was not as much use for mobile video anymore. It was really
timing is important.
Really unfortunate timing on that Quibi thing there.
Yeah. And since Conrad has experience as a chief product officer, he decided that Sonos' existing CPO was redundant. So Maxime Bouvard Marlin is also leaving Sonos, but will stay on for a few months as an advisor, while Sonos' product organization will no longer will now report directly to the interim CEO.
So yes, just a bunch of restructuring up at the top of Sonos.
Does she also get a big stack of cash?
Oh, Maxime is a male, is a man there. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry I misgendered them. I apologize.
French name. But
I honestly,
we don't know the disclosure.
50 shot and I got it wrong.
Yeah, we don't know the disclosure of how much the former CPO is getting to leave the company. But this took longer than expected. Most people expected that the people who made those ill-fated decisions would be let go sooner than this, but it's finally come around. I guess they were waiting to see how the Sonos Ace headphones actually sold, because if they sold like gangbusters, they would have just been, oh well, so we busted our app.
I had already forgotten they existed.
Right,
I'll be honest with you. Yeah, they did not.
Don't understand how you bring out Sonos headphones that cannot synchronize with any other Sonos speakers. How?
Yes. I remember
bizarre.
Now that they exist.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, well, that's a terrible choice. But
like the Sonos headphones, if they could synchronize with all your other Sonos speakers, I'd be like, hey, I could see people going for that. Even at their exorbitantly high price, I could see the use case. I can definitely see the use case for being able to use them at the same time as your home theater system, so that people who are a little hard of hearing, or if you just want to have it very quietly in the background for most other people, but somebody wants to have it loud. But it can't do that. It's one or the other, headphones or the soundbar system, not simultaneously. Very, very strange decisions.
It's a very strange thing. They definitely could have. And maybe it's a technological issue. I don't know. I mean, I'm not on that side of it.
In which case,
some issue.
Wait, hold it back until it's ready to do what everybody wants it to do, and also won't destroy your entire app for all the existing customers and ruin the good reputation that you've built over like a decade plus of being a company. Doesn't take long to ruin a reputation. Long time to build one up, not very long to tear one down.
Gentex Corporation, a supplier of dimmable glass fire protection, connected car and HomeLink smart home solutions, has. I think I have HomeLink.
I doubt it. You've probably got the Samsung thingy with a.
Well, I have something that looks that sounds like HomeLink. Maybe it's Honda Link in my car. I don't know.
That's could be substantial.
And there's also got the one for my garage door opener.
Okay.
Which also wants to work with my car, but neither one of them works very well. Anyways, they've signed a definitive agreement to acquire VOXX International in an all-cash transaction of approximately $186 million. 96 million or $7.50 per share.
Yeah, $7.
That's only like
huge.
It's only like 100 CEOs.
Yeah.
You can get 100 CEOs for that price too. Well, you don't get them. You get to fire them.
That's right.
Which might be worth it, actually. VOXX is the parent company of PAC, which is a premium audio company which runs brands such as Klipsch, Onkyo, Pioneer, Integra, Yamo, almost said Jamo, Yamo, Magnet, and others. And I'm probably saying Magnet wrong. I don't know.
That's Magnet.
So they will all be wholly owned by Gentex now. Gentex made it clear that they intend to focus on the automotive and smart home markets, so we'll have to wait and see what impact this ends up having on consumer electronics on the audio side of things once the deal is finalized.
Yeah, so this is more behind-the-scenes news, more mergers, acquisitions type of stuff, but, I mean, it strongly
This does not make any of our lives better, by the way. In case you're wondering what all these mergers and acquisitions do, they make things worse. All they do is make things worse because the competition reduces, the prices will increase, and everybody's trying to sell their companies off because they're unsure of what the next couple of years are going to look like, and they're very worried about that. So they're like, let's get out while the getting's good.
And they're also seeing the trend in consumer audio at this point, and it's bifurcating, right? You've got the very, very expensive high end market where you only have to sell a few units and you make your revenue for the year, or the very, very low end, or headphones, still successful, although not as successful as they were a few years ago. You can't just release a $350 pair of headphones, and because they're $350, you sell a gazillion of them. That's not enough anymore. The whole thing is... What I was looking at with this is, we know that Massimo Consumer is going to go away in one way or another. Right. Massimo, the hospital equipment company, doesn't exactly know precisely what they're going to do with Massimo Consumer, which are the former Sound United brands. We're talking Denon and Marantz here, over there. So some people are like, oh, well, could Onkyo end up in a reversal of fortunes? Could Onkyo end up purchasing Denon and Marantz, and that's where our AV receivers are going to go? Not likely with this sale of VOXX International, which owns Onkyo and Pioneer and Integra, now going over to Gentex, which doesn't have any experience and seemingly in their press release no interest in the AV receiver market. They're like, car audio, because there's still money in car audio, and Klipsch has a little bit of a foothold in car audio, so they said explicitly they want to expand that. So Klipsch as a brand is not going to go away. That's pretty clear.
I'm actually surprised to hear that car audio is still a thing. I mean, I know that I'm not saying, okay, every car, it used to be you bought at least in my experience, and I am, certainly no expert on this. It felt to me like you got whatever you got as far as car audio was concerned.
Well, and that's what these deals really are. I mean, they're talking about the built-in systems that come from the manufacturers. It's just that they're branded now, right? You go, you buy Mazda and it has Bose in it, right? You buy a Jeep and it has what was the one that's in there? Macintosh, right? Jeep has a partnership with Macintosh.
Jeep has Macintosh?
Yeah, Jesus. I mean, that's what it's not like. It's not like there's really much in common with the home audio.
How can you
brands.
hear it over the doors not closing all the way, or whatever's wrong with those things?
It really is just the branded thing. Revel, right? Revel shows up in some all these different audio brands. They have the car audio stuff, but it's not so much the aftermarket car audio. It's they form these partnerships with the automobile manufacturers. So that's where the money is. It's really business to business and having that branding go into the cars. So they're hoping to expand what Klipsch is there. Pioneer has a strong foothold in car audio, quite often in the actual aftermarket stuff, right? There's still a lot of Pioneer aftermarket car audio. So like those brands, just the name of the brands, I'm not worried about that. That's going to continue. But what does this mean for, I mean, specifically AV receivers, but then just the entire middle of the consumer audio market? None of this sounds like good news to me. I mean, mainly just because the big companies that are buying up these brands that we're familiar with, they are quite explicit at this point that they have no interest in those markets anymore. And I mean, I get that from a business side of things. It's not that I don't understand where they're coming from with that, but it's just concerning for me as a consumer who likes the middle of the audio market. I don't want it to just be $200 sound bars and $200,000 speakers. I want there to be something in between those two extremes for me to enjoy.
And as far as speakers go, I'm less concerned, and I think you are as well. I know you're using it as an example, but where we really are going to see or feel the lack is in the electronics. When we talk about AV receivers and stuff, we have seen companies, Motiva, who have tried to come out with their own receivers and processors and stuff like that. And I mean, they do put out a product.
They sure
does take slightly longer than they promise, and by slightly, I mean a whole lot more than
Yeah, I mean those HDMI 2.1 boards might just arrive in time for HDMI 2.2. That's about the time
that's
scale
how far behind the time is. And if this were to slow down HDMI from doing the stupid HDMI things, I would be okay with that.
No, but
I
I'd
don't
like
think
to have
it will.
that 2.1 available in something at this point. That really should be table stakes. And I mean, like Monoprice, who has been really, really good with their whole Monolith series of products, including their electronics. I mean, they still haven't released HDMI 2.1 in that HTP1 processor. So yeah, it's a struggle. I mean, if you're not a company the size of Denon or Onkyo, or at least the previous versions of those companies, it's like getting the latest electronics into a mass market priced AV receiver. I don't know who's going to do it. I mean, like I said, Yamaha is kind of still out there, but they haven't made any rumblings about updates to their lineup in a long, long time.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. Maybe see that this year.
Maybe,
hopefully, or next year.
It's just it's a little concerning to me. I'm a little concerned.
Yeah. But don't worry, because Nakamichi has announced a new flagship model of their ShockWafe series of soundbars, the 11.2.6. If you believe that. Channel ShockWafe?
Yes.
Did I say ShockWave?
I mean, probably because that's what you would expect the word to be, but it is ShockWafe. That is not a mistyping on my part. It is the ShockWafe. Are you
sure?
I am 100% sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
It should be absolutely regulate. Like there should be some sort of law that says before you name your anything,
sure,
before you release the name or a logo of anything, you should have a snarky high schooler in the room with you, or maybe early college, but that age group, like 18, 17, 18, 19-year-old in the room, and you just say it out loud and look over, and if they make any sort of facial tick at all, you're like, nope, we can't do that one. I'm going to have to find it because I forgot the name. There's a business that I drive by quite often, and the name is so like the signage itself it does not indicate that this is a joke. Okay, it is clearly targeted towards a certain client from a certain person, and it is. I mean, I almost drive off the road every time I see it because it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous that this sign is on the side of the road that nobody has complained about it. So I will look it up in a second. But ShockWafe.
Yep.
ShockWafe.
Wafe.
Are you lost your damn mind? But anyways.
I mean, I'm assuming they went to trademark Nakamichi ShockWave and they were like, well, it's going to cost some money because ShockWave is a word that already exists. And, they can probably get Nakamichi ShockWave because that's not likely to be problematic in SEO or trademarking purposes. But it was probably easier to just trademark ShockWafe because that wasn't a word before, but now it belongs to them, and it's got the SEO. Because if you know enough to type in the word ShockWafe, and Google doesn't automatically correct it to ShockWave, then you'll come to Nakamichi's site. It's going to work. But the ShockWafe series has been around for a while. That's not new. What's new is the wireless 11.2.6 version.
All right. This is wireless? Oh, it is. It does say
that's
wireless.
part of the name.
ShockWafe Wireless, yeah. So their goal was to take what they've learned from their Nakamichi Dragon soundbar, which is a much more normal name, and bring similar performance to a lower price point. This lower price point being $2,500.
That's right.
So rather than the folded ribbon tweeters found in the Dragon, the ShockWafe, damn it, wireless uses punked. I'm being punked. Kildy? Yeah.
Punked
Kildy drivers from ScanSpeak, 19 of them in the soundbar itself, including upward firing drivers at two different angles to create both top front and top middle channels.
Yep.
God help me. The wireless surround speakers are bipole design and handle both the surround and surround back channels because why not? Plus an upward firing driver in each to create the top rears. The pair of wireless subwoofers uses a 10-inch There's a pair of them at least.
There are two of them,
downward firing drivers instead of the dual opposed 8-inch drivers found in the Dragon subwoofers. The full system has 2,300 watts on board. Why not just make up more numbers? With claimed 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz frequency response, although there aren't any parameters attached to that figures.
That's right.
Which means that the drivers will move if you put a signal into them.
They sure should.
Yeah. Will it be audible? No, it will not. At many of the frequencies, not just at 20 hertz. There are two HDMI 2.1 inputs with full 4K 120 and VRR pass-through support, a single HDMI 2.1 output with eARC, and the ShockWafe Wireless is Nakamichi's first model to include Apple AirPlay 2 built in, but it doesn't have DTS-X Pro processing like the Dragon has, so you have to choose. You can sign up to be notified when the ShockWafe Wireless becomes available to purchase, and I will start an Etsy store that will sell a sticker that you can put over the ShockWafe and make it into a Shockwave, so it's less lame.
Now, I have on occasion recommended ShockWafe prior models to some people because one thing that Nakamichi is offering with their ShockWafe soundbars that is fairly unique to them is they have higher output capability than almost all other soundbars. They are meant for larger rooms than almost all other soundbars that are out there, and that is exactly what some people need sometimes is that higher output capability. So I like them for that, and I like that they include two subwoofers in pretty much all of their offerings. And they show them at the middle points of the two side walls in all of their documentation. Yeah. So
okay. I've been putting a lot of flack their way. I am now fully on board.
Now, part of that was because in their prior designs, it was a wireless connection from the soundbar to the subwoofers, but then the surround speakers were wired to the subwoofers. So that was predominantly why they usually showed the subwoofers on the side walls. And then, they had the surround speakers wired to those. Whereas with the new ShockWafe Wireless, this brand new system, everything is wireless. The surround speakers have their own wireless connection directly to soundbar. So there I have to walk it back a bit because the first promotional image of the brand new ShockWafe Wireless 11.2.6 has the two subwoofers on the front wall, which is a step backward. It's a step backward.
I'm looking at them right now, and you have lied to me.
Well,
this is a stupid number of drivers in this thing, and putting the drivers in here.
And also, unfortunately, I know they did it obviously for price purposes because they are using the more traditional soundbar decoder chips that almost everybody else has, which is why DTS-X Pro is not on board. In the Dragon, they were using a full AV receiver level decoding chip in there, like what you might find in a flagship 16-channel AV receiver model. So that one had the DTS-X Pro, whereas the ShockWafe Wireless, even though it has all these gazillions of drivers and they're claiming 11.2.6 channels, it doesn't have the actual higher-end processing to make all of those truly discrete. So there's some upmixing and matrixing and stuff going on inside of here.
Every single one of these pictures has the subwoofers on the front wall.
Well, that's an update then. They used to show, like with the Dragon and stuff, and their former ShockWaves, they had it in the middle of the wall because you had to wire your surround speakers to those subwoofers.
I think that's a better solution. I think that's the way to do it. I think that will fix.
They'll accidentally get better results for people.
I know, on the accident you get better bass. So did the announcement of HDMI 2.2 with its 96 gigabits bandwidth make you worried about future-proofing? Well, RUIPRO might have the solution for you with their new Gen4A and Gen4AK. Is that a gun? Detachable fiber optic HDMI cables. In fact, forget about the HDMI 2.2 side of things. These are just a great solution for many HDMI cable installations. So what's so special about them? I don't know. These are standard data center fiber optic cabling with maximum bandwidth of 100 gigabits per second. RUIPRO sells two versions of standard cable with a light green outer jacket and an armored, crush-resistant, high durability version with a black outer jacket. Both are extremely thin and green and black.
That's right.
Yeah, so both are extremely thin, and the standard data center connectors are much smaller than HDMI plugs and therefore easier to pull through conduit. Now, Right now, RUIPRO selling the 2.1 HDMI 2.1 source and display plugs that attach to either end. But they note that the fiber optic cable itself is fully ready for these higher bandwidth of the HDMI 2.2. Once it's available, you'll be able to purchase new HDMI 2.2 source and display plugs without having to pull all new cabling in between.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how ridiculously simple this solution seems to be for a problem that should have been solved.
And it's like, these are data center fiber optic cables that have been around for a while. So how we haven't done this before on the consumer level, maybe such things existed.
Well,
but yeah,
there was the Cables to Go, was it, that had the solution, but it wasn't fiber optic in the wall. It was like a big freaking hose of copper cable, and it had like, you could terminate it in a number, like you put it to a plate and then you could add a bunch of different things to it, if I remember correctly.
And for a while, Monoprice had a HDMI cable where they had small connectors that then plugged into full-size connectors. So again, the idea was that it was very easy to pull through a conduit, but it was not a standardized data center connection. Right. It was their own. I don't know if it was actually the mini HDMI connection that they were using, because that did exist and was rarely used. But yeah, Monoprice stopped selling that a while ago. So I'm glad to have this RUIPRO solution come back onto the market, because
this is what it should have been from the beginning.
That's right.
They should have just been like, here is a fiber optic cable that can handle a bajillion pieces of information. And with a standard termination thing, and we'll just release new
terminations whenever the spec upgrades.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay, you're going to use it to plug in your subwoofer? Fine.
Sure, that's right.
Overkill, but whatever. The display side plug does need additional power from a USB connection. Just a standard 5 volts will do. And since the fiber optic cable itself has no metal in between its two ends, there is no chance of ground loop hums or other electrical interference being picked up. Lengths range from 3 to 330 feet, and the cost of the fiber optic cable itself is pretty low, so almost all of the price is for the source and display plugs, which is, I mean, they sell you that. They give you the cable so they can sell you the tips.
Pretty darn much, yeah.
I got no problems with that. That's how razors work, too. 3 feet starts at $95, which seems a little higher than I expected that number to be.
Yeah.
For the standard green cable, or $98.32.
It is a very specific price. I'm not sure why.
Just call it 99, you nerds.
Right, yes.
What is going on? For the armored black version, 10 feet is $99.75.
Yeah, so there you go.
Regular.
Like the difference in price from $95 to $99.75 to go from 3 feet to 10 feet. So the cost is not in the cable, right? It's all in the plugs on the ends there.
$103.07
That's
for the black
for the armored
one.
Version, yes. Yeah.
Skipping up some sizes, we got 50 feet for $108.29. Or $414. 100 feet is $123.50. The cable costs nothing.
Pretty close.
And $132.52. And the full 330 feet is $218.50 for the green one, and $242.25. It's still less. It's still less than like a 10-foot copper cable, like practically 15-foot copper cable.
Wow, no, we're $200 here, but I mean, for 330 feet, find me the other solution for 330 feet long HDMI at 100 gigabits per second if you had the ends that could actually handle that much, but 48 gigabits per second for now.
Why don't the audiophiles get on stuff like this? Like I can make it's all fiber optic, no ground loop homes.
Right, yeah.
You can terminate it, and we sell you our copper, silver, gold, and platinum.
Sure.
Terminations at the end, right? So that they can like, oh well, it's a lot, more, well, I don't know.
In audio, you are necessarily converting it to digital to send it through that fiber optic cable. So there's your problem, Tom. You got to be analog only, don't you know?
Yeah, but it's EMF. EMF cannot touch it. It's light.
But you had to convert
it. It's faster. Your music will be faster. Transient responses. It'll be faster music.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're worried about that, slight impurities in the copper, or that maybe there's a little bit of aluminum in there, and the electrical conductivity is not quite the speed of light. That solves that. Fiber optic, it solves that. Yeah.
So compared to HD-based T, which cannot equal these sorts of bandwidth figures anyways, this is a reasonably affordable solution, and as future-proof as we can get for the time being.
I am going to be recommending these. I am
100,000% behind you.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if they don't come out with like crazy termination ends like for everything, it is a waste. They should absolutely, like, you're only going, like, can you imagine just coming out with like an XLR,
right?
Just to go from your processor to your amp with this thing. I mean, there's people who would buy that. There's people who would buy that. For sure.
Well, I mean, it's not as though you have to buy the RUIPRO branded data center cables. No. I mean, that's standardized data center cables, so you can get whatever length you want. It's the standard termination. That they're the ones selling the HDMI ends to go on them. So make a bajillion different kinds of ends.
I would. That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah. And then you can sell them like a USB cable to power the thing. That's perfect.
But a 100-foot cable for under $150, like that's out and out. That's not that bad. Like compared to all the other alternatives that are out there, that's not that bad price wise.
At these speeds,
yes. And if this is what you need, and by golly, is this easier to pull through a conduit? Yeah. So I am going to be recommending these in several situations. Thank you, RUIPRO, for offering.
Yes,
this thing.
Thank you, RUIPRO. If you end up making a bunch of tips, I need a cut. Comments. Ilango. First up, we'll only mention this because we have a polar opposite take coming up later during our questions, but Ilango says our recent runs of rants, including off-topic rants, have been cracking them up, so he loves them. We just keep that in mind for later. As to his real comment, he just wanted to share a couple of photos. Now that the new home gym is in their freshly renovated basement is all set up, he went with the T-cell. I'm not seeing these photos yet, so you guys are. Look at YouTube.
They do exist. Yeah, you just got to scroll down.
He went with the TCL Q651 TV, which was one of our suggestions. It's been great, and while its off-angle viewing isn't the best, they put the TV on a swing arm, so it's easy to have facing it. You can reface it whatever direction you want. 2 pairs of Sonos Mag 6 in-ceiling speakers with their retrofit back cams, plus a Polk PSW505 sub provide the audio, all powered by Yamaha RXV 385 receiver, and they use a Roku streaming stick, plus their Peloton can send this audio straight to the Yamaha receiver via Bluetooth. Right. I rode the Peloton for the first time today, which is why my butt hurts. Because nobody asked, but I'm telling you anyways. And since nothing else supports AirPlay 2, he added an old Apple Airport Express just for AirPlay. More importantly, Ilango's wife loves it, and Ilango thinks it's the best sounding gym he's been in, which is setting the bar super low. But the gym was not constructed with all the soundproofing that was put into the home theater just on the other side of the shared wall, but some of the construction was common for the whole basement, so that has really paid off. There can be just a little bit of sound transmission through the HVAC from the gym to upstairs, but it's barely noticeable. So someone can use the gym at night at full volume, and it doesn't bother anybody else in the house, which is awesome. He thanks us again for the help we provided. Now I'm looking at the pictures.
You see the photos now, Tom does, yes.
Yep.
It looks like a nice home gym.
It looks great.
Nice and clean, easy to use, soundproof, fantastic.
All right, some questions here. Bret has a Denon 3312 CI, wow, that's older, receiver and a pair of Ascend Sierra 2 bookshelf speakers in his living room. No subwoofer or any other speakers. They only ever watch sports and kids shows in this room. He's noticed that some of those kids shows actually have some pretty heavy bass from time to time, and with this being a wide open room to the rest of the house, you could sometimes hear the Sierra 2 bass woofers making some bad noises, and he reached out to Ascend to ask if it's potentially a danger to the speakers. The answer is probably yes.
If it's that audible at that point, you're getting to some cone breakup at that point. Yeah.
Turned out, since he had configured his Denon with no sub, the bookshelf speakers were automatically set to large, and he was also using Odyssey Dynamic EQ. Oof.
Yeah.
So once he adjusted those settings and applied an 80 hertz crossover, the noises from the over-excursion of the bookshelf woofers is gone. But the sound is no longer as impressive as it once was, and he's missing that bass. You didn't have the bass to begin with. You had noise, but you had more bass because you rolled them off.
No
at 80.
crossover, yeah.
So Ascend suggested that he could order the Sierra 2 to Sierra 2 EXV2 upgrade kits. They say the newer EXV2 woofer can play considerably lower and louder than the original Sierra 2 woofer, but the kits cost $400 each. So that's $800. You get a subwoofer for that. But he really likes the simplicity of the setup, and he isn't keen to add a large subwoofer to this wide open space. So maybe he can get a physically smaller subwoofer, but it would actually need to be something worthwhile to use in that wide open space, and you probably want 2 of them, right? This is a slippery slope.
Yeah.
So what do we say you should do? How would his money be best spent, and how can he avoid ending up with a pair of SB17 Ultras for $5,000? Well, I mean, there is a middle ground between nothing and...
But he's just like, it's all the cubic footage, but I want physically smaller. You end up with SB17 Ultras at some point, don't you? So, yeah, that's a slippery slope he wants to avoid.
And just to throw another wrinkle into things, he already owns a pair of SVS SB13 Ultra subs that he uses as a current home theater, which is a large bedroom. It's got to be freaking huge for those things. The SB13 Ultras have more than enough headroom for where they are now, but he is planning to move his theater to his basement in the not too distant future, and that space will be over 9,000 cubic feet. He tried bringing just one of the SB13 Ultras into open living room space just to see how it would sound with the CR2 speakers, and he was pretty darn happy with the results. And if he sticks to just a single SB13 Ultra in the living room, he can visually hide it fairly easily, although a cylinder sub, single one, could also work well. So what's the play here? Moving his pair of SB13 Ultras into the 9,000 plus cubic foot basement probably isn't optimal, right? But the basement isn't ready to become his dedicated home theater yet, so does it make sense to buy a pair of monster subs now, but only use them in the current bedroom theater until the basement is ready? And then he probably won't move both the SB13 Ultras into the living room. He'd probably just use one of them. So does he sell one of them? Or would it actually make sense to sell both of his SB13 Ultras and then buy 3 new subwoofers? How do you slide down that slippery slope to that conclusion? Well, the simplest solution, and this is not the one you want, but the simplest solution is just to stop caring about the bass in that room that you care about. Sure. I mean, that's the simplest solution, because in reality, if you really are only... because you have a theater, right? So if you're only watching sports, and I don't know what that means. The kids shows, I know what that means. But if you're only watching sports, if you are only watching sports in here, what does that mean? Does that mean that it's a wide open space and there's a kitchen and you put the sports on in the background, and as you're cooking or having dinner with your family, or maybe you just sit down to casually watch it while other things are going on in the house so you can spend time with your family? And yeah, you miss the bass, but is that really what the point is? Can you not go, if you cared that much, could you not go into the theater and watch the sports? Maybe you can't. I mean, I don't know what your setup is like. So is it really that important that you have this bass here? Is it important enough? I personally do not think that you should pay for the upgrade of the speakers. While this is certainly an option, I would just get new speakers, to be honest with you. I would get tower speakers or something like that, because these are not towers that he's dealing with, right?
No. These are definitely bookshelf speakers. And yeah, I have trouble in this instance saying that the right move to make here is the Sierra 2 to Sierra 2 EXV2 upgrade kits, $800 for the pair. I'm like, I wouldn't spend my money in that way for this scenario, because, I mean, it is true, they do play lower and louder than the original Sierra 2, but that's not the right way to spend the money in this case. I don't think so. I'm not against you spending some money, but I think I'm closer in this instance to the suggestion of, hey, I want to expand my 9-speaker setup to the 11-speaker setup, and falling down that slippery slope of what amplifier do I buy?
Yeah,
I want to be closer to the get the 2-channel Fosse amp to power your surround backs or your rear heights versus end up with an 11-channel gigantic monolith amplifier type of thing. Right. I want to be closer to the first end. Now it's not going to be quite as cheap in this case as getting a Fosse 2-channel amp, but if you were satisfied bringing a single SB, the sealed box 13 Ultra, from your current, spare bedroom setup, which is a large bedroom, you said, but certainly not 9,000 cubic feet that you're facing in the future, but bringing one of those into this wide open living room, and you're like, yeah, I'm not looking for theater bass in here. I just want to fill in what the bookshelf speakers can't do on their own, protect them with a crossover, which you've now done, but have that, audible bass in this room. You can get pretty darn similar performance. It's surprising how much you can get from an RSL Speedwoofer 10S.
Okay. Because I expected you to say. But
yeah, that's a ported design, which in your case, with the Speedwoofer 10S, they're now on the Mark II, so it's the Speedwoofer 10S Mark II. With that design, they actually give you a choice of a little bit more output, but rolling off at 25 hertz, or a little bit deeper extension right down to about 20 hertz, but with less output. We're not worried about 20 hertz output in this scenario, right? It's kid shows and it's sports, and you just want to fill in the lower bass that the bookshelf speakers can't reach. So you set it to its higher output mode. It's a ported design, but box size-wise, it's about the same size as your SB13 Ultra. So physically, it's about the same size, which you said one of those in the room, you can visually hide no problem. And then with that ported design, it actually has quite similar output capabilities as the sealed, much more expensive one. It's amazing how much you get from having that port. So that's $450. I
like that.
Yeah, the Speedwoofer 10S Mark II, which is not nothing. That's not nothing that you're spending here, but it's basically the cost of one upgrade kit, slightly more than one upgrade kit. It's nowhere near buying 2 monster subs or 3 brand new subs. I don't want you buying the future basement subs right now. Wait until you actually have that basement ready, and then you can go ahead and get yourself some new subs, because heaven knows Tom and I have been through so many scenarios where we've been envisioning and planning what the future room is going to be, and then that day either never comes or it comes many more
Rob
years
is currently
in the
living
future.
in this situation.
Oh, sure. And look, Tom is too, right? You don't even have your own house right now. So what if you had planned a year ago on some room upgrade and bought some monster subs? They'd be completely useless to you. Now, we don't know exactly what the future holds. Yeah, so when your basement is ready and you're like, hey, it's time. Okay, fine. Come back to us. We'll talk about what subs you should buy, but don't buy them right now. There's obviously no need for them in the room you have to use right now, that large bedroom. No need for that. You've got 2 subs that handle the room you have with aplomb and then some. So I'm like, okay, some money spent, $450 for that Speedwoofer 10S Mark II. If you end up selling that in the future, you have no problem selling a Speedwoofer. Those RSL Speedwoofers sell like hotcakes if you ever want to sell it off. So I think that's the play here.
Okay. I am 100% behind Rob's suggestion. I have no problems saying that. That's not what I expected them to say. But I guess from a more economical standpoint, if you're okay, because I got the sense from what I read that you moved the sub down just to try it out, but you weren't going to be happy leaving it down there. So your thought might be, I can get these 2 big subs. The 2 big subs I'm going to put in my room later. We'll put them in my home theater right now.
That's right.
And then I'll just have to turn the volume way down, whatever. But then I can take the SB17, put it down there, and then eventually, and then sell the other one or something to help. That sort of thing. I can understand how you get there. I agree with Rob. I think you don't buy until you're ready to use. Yeah. And I know people are like, well, there's a sale right now and I'm going to miss out on the sale. No.
Room first.
No. Room first. Because what ends up happening is these things sit in boxes.
Yeah.
All right. And they're going to sit in boxes. And even in your case, if you took them out and used them or whatever, you're barely going to be using them. They're just barely used. So if there is something physically wrong with these subs, you might not even notice.
And they could even mean worse results in your large bedroom right now, because if they're so physically big that you can't position them optimally or set them up optimally, you might end up sacrificing the actual sound quality right now for these monster subs that may or may not get used in the future.
So my economical solution, if there is one here, is to just figure out where you can put that SB17, a single one in your home theater.
Right now, yes,
13, sorry. The 13 in your home theater to get good enough bass for now.
Oh, I see. Okay, so buy
and then take the other one, put it downstairs.
One sub in the theater, one sub in the living room. Yeah.
Yes,
no money spent.
I'm saying upstairs or upstairs, whatever. It doesn't matter. And then live like that for a bit. And you're like, well, I don't want to have worse space in my home theater. I understand that. I don't want to spend $450 if I were you. I would want to just wait until I had because then you'll end up right where you want to be, which is you'll have one good sub in that you've already paid for.
Yeah.
It's paid for. That's spent money, right? In your living room. And if you're like, okay, well, now the basement's done. I'm buying subs for the basement. I have an extra sub. What am I going to do with this extra sub? Well, you can do one of 2 things. You can sell it, which I think is a perfectly viable option that you should think about. Or you can put it on top of the one that you currently have, and now you have more bass in that room. You have 6 dB more output. Let's go, baby. Suddenly you've got a little bit more. So to me, those are the two viable options. Buy the RSL, which I think is perfectly fine and a reasonable choice, or just live with a little bit worse space for a while until you're ready to buy.
Yeah, I'm on board with that too.
Mike wants to try and help a friend from work. He's like, by the way, the last person I tried to help, I gave him a bunch of suggestions, and I specifically said some very specific things, and they did all of the things the opposite of what I said.
Sounds about right.
So get ready for that, Mike. He's light on detail, so he doesn't know the size of the room. They expect the seating distance or the budget, so whatever. He says Mike's friend says he wants to set up a small home theater in his basement, and while he wants a full Atmos speaker configuration, he wants the price to be about as low as it can reasonably be. There's a $2,500 soundbar with your name on it, son. He'd also favor speakers that can be mounted on the walls. Mike understands that the lack of specific info means we can't nail down our ideal recommendations, but he's hoping we can offer just a few suggestions for speaker brands he could look to as a starting point. He's aware of SVS, Monoprice, and RSL. Would those be our top choices? Or are there others he should definitely be looking at for his friend to consider? I'm going to be dead honest with you. In these situations, oftentimes I am less recommending and more listening.
Okay.
When people ask, want my opinion, I will give it to them, but invariably they do not take that advice. They're not interested. What they are interested in is the speaker system they saw at Costco. Okay. That's what they're interested in. They saw it. They like it. They did their research. They found a bunch of reviews from users on Amazon or Reddit or whatever that say it's the best thing since sliced bread. And they're just looking for you to confirm that. So that's sort of the direction I would go. I would be speaking more in broad terms with this person and worry less about specific. I mean, there's tons of brands out there you can recommend. Sure, RSL, SVS, and Monoprice are all good brands.
Absolutely.
Ascend, of course.
I have no problem.
Aperion would be okay. You could also look at RBH for some on-walls because he said he wanted, that sort of thing. But that's not the cheapest price.
No, not the cheapest price, no.
But is HSU still selling speakers?
Well, they still have their CCB8s. Those are still around for sure. They technically still have the horn-loaded bookshelf, but they don't have the horn-loaded center anymore, so it's kind of hard to build a whole system of those, and they don't have any of their in-wall speakers anymore, which I loved, those HSU in-wall speakers, and I'm so sad that they're gone. But yeah, so the CCB8s are kind of the only thing that's left there. But I do still mention them because if this actually turns out to be quite a large basement room with a quite large seating distance, and you need lower price but high efficiency, right? Because you need to have that higher sensitivity so that you don't have to get 400 watt amplifiers to handle the room size and the seating distance. Well, HSU still comes as a great potential option there because they have the high sensitivity in their speakers that can be very, very useful in some scenarios. Like you said, absent many of the details that are very germane to what a recommendation would actually be. That's certainly one that
you're going to want to say the word Klipsch. You're going to want to say the word and watch their face. Okay? Because chances are they've already decided that they want Klipsch because they saw it at Costco or whatever. And so you're going to want to say that. And if you see their expression change, or they kind of light up or they kind of lean forward, just know that they've already made their decision at that point. When I said higher level or kind of take a step back, I think what you should be talking to this person about, especially if they are, because a lot of times what they mean by small theater is they want to set up something in the corner of a much larger space.
Of the basement. Yes.
I would talk to them about that you can get just as good performance, if not more, better performance from fewer speakers if they're placed well versus shoehorning a bunch of speakers into an area where they are not located as well. So, Atmos is like everybody's top whatever because that they keep pushing it. Everybody Atmos this, Atmos that. They know the buzzword. They know it's the new thing, and Atmos is fine. It does a thing that is done, and then in the end, you hear it and you go, "I can't believe I spent that much money to make that thing happen." That was weird.
On that tip of wanting to do Atmos, but not necessarily breaking the bank for it. One thing I would point to before I'm going to get back to speaker recommendations, but one thing I would point to is over at Accessories for Less, they are still selling the Onkyo NR7100 model. That's basically been replaced in Onkyo's lineup now by the new RZ30 model. But the NR7100s, they're selling them at Accessories for Less, even brand new. They have the refurbished B-stock version, but even brand new, it's only like $50 more for the A-stock brand new, never opened ones that they have over there, and that is by far the best deal for a 9-channel. So this would be a 5.2.4 setup. But yeah, nothing beats that in terms of price for something that can do 4 overhead speakers. In fact, it's at the current price at Accessories for Less, considerably less expensive than a lot of 7-channel AV receivers that are out there. So definitely that's one to keep in mind. Keep in mind that NR7100, because your friend is going to need an AV receiver. So I would definitely, and if they're talking a quote-unquote small home theater setup, even if it is just a section of the basement, you're probably not going to need more than 5.2.4 if what they were envisioning was a relatively small footprint that they're setting all of this up. So just in terms of out-and-out sense, if I just wanted to point somebody to what I think is probably the best bang for buck right now in terms of the lowest price that still has good performance, it probably would be RSL right now, including the packages that they sell with like that, Speedwoofer 10S Mark II. If this is a small to medium-sized room, like this actually is a spare bedroom in the basement, right? It's an enclosed room, and it's like 12 by 15 or something like that. If that's what we're talking about when he's saying small home theater in the basement, then like RSL would be a fantastic choice. I don't know if you could really beat them, dollar for performance right now. And they have the option of that nice white finish as well. If they don't just want basic black, they have that white finish that's limited time right now, but the price isn't any more than the black version. So that's one I would definitely have a look at, but it really is room size dependent. The RSL speakers are very nice, but they are not appropriate for a really large room or a really far seating distance. They are for a small to medium sized room. So then again, you mentioned like maybe being wanting to wall mount speakers. Yeah, Tom mentioned Ascend. Their HTM 200 SE, now version 2 speakers are fantastic for wall mounting. Sound great, but don't look particularly fancy. They are just very plain black boxes, but that's one that you could look into. SVS, of course, the Prime series, good value there, but I'm not sure that they're like the maximum value or the very best looks, and they're not wall mountable, so I'm not sure that they're exactly what you're looking for here, but you're already familiar with them. So yeah, we mentioned HSU, their CCB8s, we mentioned RBH, their Impression on-wall speakers. The only other one we haven't really talked about that I think is worth a look is JBL's new Stage 2 series of speakers. Now, they have been measured by places like Aaron's Audio Corner and Audio Science Review, and like they're not perfectly linear speakers. The speakers themselves have a bit of a smiley face shape to their frequency response. And so for that reason, some people who are, absolute linear measurements or nothing, they're not the biggest fan of the JBL Stage 2s, but places like Aaron's Audio Corner have pointed out how they do have JBL's nice even dispersion, which means that you can EQ those speakers quite effectively. They're not speakers where if you EQ them, they're going to sound wildly different because they have narrow dispersion or something like that. They are quite, you can EQ them quite effectively. And what I like about the JBL Stage 2 is 2 things. One, I think they look nice, and that could be very important. They have both the black and white finish options, and both of them look quite nice. So if aesthetics are important here, but keeping the price down, they're an option there. And they can play a bit louder than a lot of the other speakers. They are a little bit higher sensitivity to design. Not quite as high sensitivity as the HSUs, but a bit higher sensitivity than like the RSLs or the RBHs. You can get more sound out of them per watt, and that might be very useful if this actually is a larger room with a greater seating distance. So those are some of the other options, in addition to the ones you mentioned, and I think that gives you a starting point.
Yeah, and you can also check out the NHT offerings.
Yeah.
NHTs are like, I think the Super Zeros are like $130 a piece, and they do have wall mounts that you can get for them. And I don't know that you have to buy their specific wall mounts, but those are small, physically small speakers. They're not huge. They have the Super Ones, which I think are larger, if I remember correctly, probably more expensive. But if they've got this, still have the Bose mentality, which a lot of people do, might be and if it's a small area and you don't need a lot of output, might be okay with that too. So just give you some options.
Sure.
Sami. So Ascend Acoustics has their ELX flagship series of speakers, which are upgraded versions of the Sierra Tower and Sierra Horizon Center. Are the ELX versions worth the asking price?
So we kind of have to go over what the prices are.
Okay, you do that. I'm going to go get some coffee.
Okay, because if you look at the Ascend Sierra towers with the Titan dome tweeters, those are selling for $3,000 a pair, whereas the ELX version, so the ELX version, it's the same look, same cabinet design, same dimensions and all that, same tweeter options where you can get either the Titan dome tweeter or the RAL ribbon tweeter for an upgraded price for the RAL ribbon tweeter, but the dedicated mid-range driver, that is changed from the mid-range driver that's used in the standard Sierra Tower or Sierra Horizon speaker. It's changed to the EX driver, the dedicated mid-range, and the two woofers in there are changed to the LX driver. So it's all about the dedicated mid-range driver and the two bass woofers. Those have all been changed, and that's where the difference in price and higher power handling, higher output, deeper extension all comes from. So yeah, like I was saying, the original Sierra Towers with the Titan Dome tweeter, they're $3,000 a pair. The ELX version is $4,400 a pair, right? So $700 more per speaker there. If you go to the RAL ribbon tweeter versions, then the original Sierra Tower with the RAL ribbon tweeter is $3,600 a pair, right? So $300 for each RAL ribbon tweeter upgrade, whereas they go all the way up to $5,300 a pair for the ELX Tower with the RAL ribbon tweeters. So what happened there, right? Because the Titans to the RAL ribbon tweeters, it's the same change. It's $600 more in the case of the original Sierra Towers, but for some reason it's $900 more in the ELX version. And then on the horizon, the original Titan version with the dome tweeter, that's $1,350, and then the ELX version is $2,500. Whereas the RAL ribbon versions, they're $1,750 for the original. So for some reason, the RAL ribbon tweeter upgrade is $400 there, whereas the ELX version is $2,800. So now it's only a $300 increase, right? So yeah, the prices don't exactly completely make sense, because it's like, it was a $300 price increase to go from the Titan tweeter to the RAL ribbon tweeter in the ELX Horizon. For some reason, it was $400 more to get the RAL ribbon tweeter in the original Sierra Horizon, and then it's like $300 more for the RAL ribbon tweeters in each of the original towers, but now it's $450 more in the ELX towers. So I can't fully explain why the differences in price from the Titan Dome tweeters to the RAL ribbon tweeters fluctuates so much. That doesn't completely make sense. I'm not totally sure what was going on there. In terms of just going from the original Sierra versions to the ELX versions, though, it's a little bit more than just the cost of the drivers. With those ELX versions, they are hand selecting the cabinets, because the cabinets are made out of real laminated bamboo, and you're seeing the actual original wood grain finish of those bamboo cabinets. And so for the ELXs specifically, they are hand selecting the very best cuts that they had for the ELXs. So there's a little bit of additional price in there, because honestly, the cabinets are what costs the most in any speaker. And so they're justifying some of that increased price increases, not just the driver cost. It's that they are hand selecting the cabinets for the ELX series. So are they absolutely worth it? If you don't have a room size and a seating distance that exceeds the capabilities of the original Sierra Tower and the original Sierra Horizon, then I say no. I say the only reason you need to pay more for the ELX series is that you have a larger room and a greater seating distance that demands more output capability than the original Sierra Tower and the original Sierra Horizon can muster. It is about a genuine 2.5 to 3 decibels more output. In the base, it's a full 3 decibels more. That's twice the power that had to go in there to get that extra 3 decibels of output in the base. Up in the mid-range and treble, it's closer to 2.5 decibels more because they don't have the increased extension as well. But that's what's going on there. It's the same question as, am I justified in going from a PB2000 to a PB17 Ultra, or more like, going from a PB2000 to a PB4000, right? It's a similar type of, there's more headroom, there's more output. That's what you're paying for. If you need that more output, then it's justified. If you don't, then no, it's not justified. You don't have to do it just because it exists.
But if it's more expensive, it must be better, Rob. Must be.
Nope. Don't spend it unless you need to.
Infinite Gary. So LG and Panasonic both announced new flagship OLED TVs that use LG displays' new 4-layer OLED panel with no micro lens array, rather than last year's 3-layer panel with a micro lens array. Everybody who got to see the side-by-side comparison with last year's panels has reported the new panel is indeed noticeably brighter, particularly when it comes to full screen white images and individual color brightness. I often wonder how they figure that out at a trade show, but whatever. As we all know by now, Gary prefers a dimmer image overall. I had already forgotten that, Gary, but thank you for reminding us. But he does appreciate when small specular highlights stand out in HDR, and he's a fan of HDR images being as accurate as they can be with little tone mapping applied as possible. So he's considering the new Panasonic Z95B.
Of course Gary is. He's going to get one anyway, no matter what we say.
This is like he's the kind of person who, when he uses his blinker, he's not asking to come in, he's letting you know what's about to happen. Right. But what about the experience when watching SDR? He's thinking of hockey games in particular, which are pretty much all still broadcast in SDR, not HDR. He had his current LG G3 OLED professionally calibrated, and he made sure that peak white for SDR was set to exactly 100 nits, as the standard calls for. But when most of the screen is showing the white ice surface, he finds that a bit too bright to his eyes. So with this new 4-layer panel, make the white ice appear even brighter, even if it's calibrated to the same peak 100 nits for SDR. I mean, I'm going to say no because it's true, but you're going to think it is brighter because that's traditionally what has happened in this relationship.
No, I mean, yeah, so
it 100 nits is 100 nits, full stop. I mean, if they're measuring 100 nits,
that's right.
That's how bright it is. It's not going to be brighter than the 100 nits.
So, I mean, there is the question of, like, so full white screen, you calibrate a full white screen, 100 nits on either display, that's going to be the same. But of course, I mean, even on a hockey rink, it's not literally a full white screen. There are other elements on screen. The white of the ice is not the pure D65 white. It is an off-white versus D65. Sure. So there's certainly the possibility that in your perception of it, even if 100% screens are both calibrated to exactly 100 nits, your perception of it could be different because it isn't a pure white screen, because it isn't D65 white, the ice surface. So yeah, not out of the question that perceptually it might appear. It could appear dimmer for all we know. I don't know. It might depend on the exact color points and how they interact with your specific human eyes. But yes, in terms of SDR, you are absolutely able to calibrate them to the same, that one of them is not brighter than the other, that can be calibrated that way. You can have the option with the new G5 that will be coming out of calibrating it to be brighter than the G3 if it just has that additional headroom. There are some people with a sun-drenched room who want greater overall screen brightness, and the G5 will give that to them. Gary's not going to use it, so you should be fine. You should be able to turn that OLED light setting down as low as it needs to go, that it isn't hurting your eyes.
Which just begs the question why you need a brighter display to begin with, but let's just go on. So he's still trying to decide if he wants to buy the Kaleidescape Strato V or not. We know full well that he doesn't have any problem with spending the money if he wants a new piece of equipment, but thinking it through rationally, he bought a grand total of 6 Ultra HD Blu-ray discs last year in 2024, and an average price around $28. Mm-hmm. And after a couple of viewings of each of them, he gave most of these discs to his nephew, which is harder to do when you've downloaded them from
Well, that's
Kaleidescape.
just it, yeah.
Going with Kaleidescape wouldn't save him any money on individual movie purchases, and he wouldn't be able to give any of the discs or the movies away to anyone else when he's done watching them. So it would have to justify his purchase in other ways, and he's just not seeing how he gets there. Can we come up with anything to convince him to spend money? What?
I mean, it's there. People are praising it. He's feeling like he's missing out, but he's like, but rationally speaking, it doesn't make sense for me to spend the $3,000 or whatever it ends up costing.
Has Gary finally turned the corner and is now going to stop spending money? Is this even, what world am I living in?
I know.
Yeah, Gary, don't buy a Kaleidescape. I mean, usually that makes you buy it,
right?
But I think this time it should make you not buy it, because there's literally I can see no reason other than you not having to get up and physically put the disc
suppose,
in.
yeah. I mean, it really
That's
is
really the only benefit. How much you could hire somebody, Gary, to be on call, to come to your house within. At the minute you're like, I think I might watch a movie tonight. You could text them and say, I'm going to watch a movie tonight. I would like you to be here at this time to put the disc in for me. And I think if you called me, and I lived close by, and said, I would like to hire you to do this, I'll give you $100 every time you do.
Yeah, because if it's only 6 times a year, that's still not that bad.
You're still coming out so far ahead. And I mean, you could... And even if you did it twice, right? Because they have to take the disc out afterwards, right? They have to put technically, you wouldn't want to. I mean, unless you're okay with them leaving it in there until you have the next disc that you want to watch. I guess that's probably the better
it's still
thing.
Going to take
$600.
3 years before you've spent the cost of the Kaleidescape. Yeah. I mean, I've got a couple of things. One I've mentioned before is if you're the sort of person who really appreciates seeing the movies at home as early as possible, as close to when they've left the theater as you possibly can. Kaleidescape very often has the movies available before they're on, even Apple TV 4K, in their store. Certainly before the physical disc is released. Definitely before it's going to come out on streaming. So if you really value seeing the movie as soon as you possibly can after it's left the theater, Kaleidescape has the advantage there. So that could be one reason. The other one is Kaleidescape does offer rentals. So it's getting harder and harder to rent physical discs. It's very easy to rent movies via, not streaming, but from one of the services where you pay per view. That's very, very easy, but Kaleidescape does have the superior image and audio quality that is, if not equal to, sometimes better than the disc. In terms of that. So if you rent a lot, it could be worth it for that way. If you're like, I want the maximum audio video quality, I want it as early as possible, and I want to rent, but I want the better quality than what the Amazon Prime Video or Apple Movies gives me as far as the audio video quality. But I want the disc quality, but I don't necessarily want to buy the disc or wait for the disc. Well, then Kaleidescape could have value for you there. So that would be the reason.
All right. Henry, first up, Henry appreciated our advice to him about potentially buying 2 more Paradigms Founder Series 70 LCR speakers. He already has one that he's using as a center, and putting all 3 70 LCR speakers horizontally below his projection screen. After hearing what we had to say about it, he decided to stick with his bookshelf left and right speakers. I'm okay with that. And maybe just make up some changes to the padding that he used to level out their heights on his non-level floor so the aesthetics don't bother him as much.
Yep.
I always love saving money, so I'm okay with that.
I think that is the right way to go.
But on to another matter. He was doing some cable management behind his equipment rack, and unfortunately, he had forgotten to power off his Anthem MCA50 amplifier. Something went very wrong, and with a very loud humming sound and then the amp falling silent. He hoped it was just a blown fuse in the amp, but after replacing that and checking on everything for any damage, it turned out the right surround channel was completely non-functional now, and his right surround speaker was also dead. He replaced the speaker, and then he took the amplifier to a local repair shop, but after they had a look, they said it would be a $650 repair, which was more than he wanted to pay. So looking around on Facebook Marketplace, he found someone selling a used price Monolith 5 amplifier for $500. It's not that much cheaper than what the repair is, but let's go on. This was the original 5x200 watt version with RCA inputs only, no XLR, but he's using the Marantz Cinema 70 AV receiver in preamp mode as this processor, and he only needs RCA connections right now anyway. So why bring it up? He had sort of assumed, but just based on the price and brand reputation, that his Anthem would naturally have been the superior amp, and that neither his Anthem MC50 nor this Monolith 5 would compete with much more expensive endgame amplifiers that he had to rely on. But so he thought this monoprice amp would just be something to tide him over, but this thing is built like a tank. And monoprice customer service confirmed to him that it is actually an ATI amplifier design, which we would have told you and probably have many times. And while he cannot do an instant A/B comparison with its Anthem amplifier, he really is not noticing any downgrade in the sound quality.
Yep.
Good. Yep. That's exactly what you should be noticing.
That's right.
That is what it is. He's read the claims that some people make about amplifiers all sounding the same, including us.
Sure.
As long as none of them are being used outside of their specification. But then he's also read the polar opposite claims about different amplifiers making big, noticeable differences, which is all lies. After hearing... It's not lies, but it's wrong. Or it's something else. After hearing this Monolith amplifier, though, he's really questioned whether he'll notice any drastic difference if he were to spend thousands on a more endgame amp. So his question to us, could he realistically just continue using this Monolith 5 amplifier for, well, as long as it lasts? Don't even bother with getting his amp fixed, his Anthem amp repaired? Forget about spending the money he's been saving up for an endgame amp. You've been saving? And just consider this Monolith to be his 5-channel amp moving forward? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. A bajillion percent. You have stumbled backwards into what we have been talking about from the dawn of this podcast. Well, I have been talking about, and Rob has believed since long before then. We've all kind of been in this situation where we have believed the hype of a thing, and then we experience the thing.
No, I mean, no blame here. It makes absolute sense if he's reading a huge number of the review sites that are out there, a huge number of the YouTubers and stuff like that. Yeah. You're absolutely led to believe that, first of all, without question, anything that is separate automatically sounds better than an AV receiver, just because it's separate.
I hate to break that to you too, man.
And then, of course. How could there be $200,000 monoblock amplifiers if they didn't justifiably sound better than a $1,500 5 or 7 channel amplifier? Which, by the way, $1,500 is a lot of money for anyone to spend on a piece of audio equipment.
It is.
Yeah, no, I mean, objectively speaking, the measurement of these Monolith amplifiers is stellar. The only reason, and there is a scenario in which I, and even Tom, would tell you that it could be worth your while to spend more money on a different amplifier, is you've got a really big room, you sit really far away from your speakers are not particularly sensitive, and mathematically speaking, you genuinely need more than 200 watts per channel. Like, that is possible. It's within the realm of possibility. We had a listener who had like a practically cinema-sized room, and he had normal speakers with Trinov amplification. He's like, it just can't get loud enough. And we're like, your speakers are normal efficiency without the headroom capabilities, and he needed to buy more efficient speakers because he wasn't planning to upgrade his amplifiers. The only other way he could have gotten there was he still would have had to change his speakers no matter what, because the speakers he had just didn't have the output capabilities for his really, really big room. But that could be the scenario where either of us on this podcast will tell you there's a mathematical reason to get different amplification, but we've seen this room before. It's not a very big room. You don't need this Monolith amplifier. We'll tell you, mathematically speaking, you don't need this Monolith amplifier. You didn't need the Anthem amplifier. But we don't have any problem with you having amplifiers like this. I've got an amplifier like this. It's completely
Rob certainly cannot point fingers. That's for
Nothing
sure.
like that. But no, there's no scenario where objectively speaking there is anything other than it's possible to buy an amplifier where you would hear a difference. That is totally possible to do. The only thing that other amplifier could be doing is messing up the signal somehow, like taking it away from linearity or adding a whole bunch of distortion to it to the point that it's audibly different. This Monolith amplifier is ruler flat into any impedance load that you might connect to it, other than, I don't know, if you took 4 4-ohm speakers and connected all of those in parallel, it might start to struggle then. But it'll drive a 2-ohm load all day long, no problem. So like any impedance load you could realistically connect to it in your room size, headroom for years, and the distortion is super, super low. Like the only thing an audibly different amp could do is to mess up the signal in an audible way. So this is your amp moving forward. Don't spend any more money. You're done.
Yeah. And we've talked about this from a number of different perspectives here, but from what you've experienced, though, is you have taken other people at their words, which I think there's no problems doing that, because you have to. You have to at some point believe somebody, and if enough people say a thing, you kind of have to give it some credence.
Sure.
And I know I have done that as well, and not just AV, but also other aspects of my life, including bikes and cars and God knows what else. When you have the chance, and it's so rare in most people's lives, but when you have the chance to experience the thing that you've heard so much about and you've got so many assumptions about, and then your assumptions are immediately challenged, you have two possible things that your brain will do.
Yeah.
One, your brain will recalibrate, as yours has done, and go, wait a second, that sounds exactly the same. I don't understand. Wait a second. I don't, something's wrong. I should be hearing these things that people have been talking about, or I should be experiencing these things that people are talking about.
Here's this price difference. I can easily see the price difference. It's right there on the webpage.
But yet these two things feel the same. Yeah. They feel the same to me. Or you do the other thing, which is I now have to do whatever mental gymnastics I have to do in order to convince myself that there is, in fact, this difference that what I was expecting is actually true.
The cognitive dissonance, right? Yes. Yeah, the thing I expected before, I have to figure out a way to back my way into that existing belief.
You've done it. You've overcome the audiophile hurdle. You've escaped the black hole of audiophile. And now you have to realize that you have to reevaluate, and we all do this. Understand. Andrew, in fact, talks about it on AV Gadgets quite a bit, and he's spoken to me about it on a number of occasions. The first time he had this experience like you're talking about, and I think it was with an amplifier, it might have been something else, he just went, oh God. And he looked at his equipment rack and went, oh no. I have spent money poorly on this thing. I don't.
And by the way, like that Anthem amplifier that you had before, performance-wise, I have no criticism of it whatsoever. Objectively speaking, it's a fantastic amplifier, every bit like the Monolith amplifier that you have now. So there shouldn't be any audible difference between those two. But I mean, what's really going to cook your bacon is when you just put your Marantz AV receiver out of preamp mode, just use its built-in amplifiers, and in the size of room that you're using with the speakers that you're using at your seating distances, there's still no audible difference, because that's what it should be.
What Andrew does and has done, and you can look on AV Gadgets for just search selling used gear or something like that, is basically he did that, and then started testing everything else. Noticed, I don't need all this stuff, and started selling it all, because there's two things. So normally, I would have a problem with selling something doesn't really make an audible difference to somebody else. It feels a little bit like you're swindling them, but I don't think you are. I think what you're doing is, first of all, you don't know what their room's like. They could need it. Okay, they could need a big amplifier. You don't know. And second, you're giving them the opportunity to have the same experience you just had
at a lower price
that they
than
can
buying
then
it brand
pass
new.
it on.
Yeah.
I know, because it works. So you start doing things like that. And he pared the system down and pared the system down and pared the system down. Every once in a while, he starts believing something and he buys it and he goes, oh my God, I did it again. You know what I mean? This is a normal kind of state. You have to, on some level, do these things. So you have to have these experiences, because, we can all read about what it feels like to drive a Lamborghini or a Ferrari and how they might be different experiences in a Lamborghini versus a Ferrari. But since none of us have done it, We don't know. We don't know what it feels like, and we don't know if the difference would even be noticeable to us. So this is what you've experienced here. So pass it along, or live with what you have and know you don't have to ever upgrade again, and you can spend all that money you save for these end game amps, which I don't know whether they can do, snap their fingers and everything dies, but these end game amps, you can spend it on something else that actually will make an audible difference, in your system, or better your life in some way. Jim has been a long-time listener, but he has a gripe. He finds us informative, and he thinks our episodes get entertaining after about 30 minutes. Gee, what happens in those first 30 minutes, Rob? I don't know.
That's right.
Rob usually talks about movies, that's for sure.
That's true.
But it seems to him we complain about social media and the state of the world every single show. I'm sorry, I didn't put it on fire. I'm just pointing it out. He says...
No, I was going to say something kind of similar, but that was more succinct and to the point. I like it.
So he says he listens to a lot of podcasts, all kind of different topics, and no other podcast hosts have this habit.
Yeah, I don't know what podcasts
freaking true.
It's not my experience. I listen to a lot of podcasts too. Yeah, we're not the only ones.
I'm sure, yes. And then we could get to the point more. And honestly, this is I feel you. Yeah, no,
okay.
I disagree with what you're saying, but I understand what you're saying, and I agree with your sentiment.
Yeah, I understand.
And the reason is you have to understand. Rob and I don't talk to each other.
Not much. Yeah. We text.
It's not that we don't. It's that it costs money for us to call each other because it's across a border.
Well, that's
and when
not
the tariffs
totally
kick
true.
in, we're really going to have to pay money for it.
I can do the cross-border calling, but no, we don't do much phone calling. We text sometimes, but yeah,
we do
not
text sometimes.
Yeah.
No, so what you hear us talk about on this podcast is almost every word we say to each other. So yes, we spend the beginning of this podcast sort of catching up and joking around. Yeah. And if you don't like it, there's timestamps.
Well, that's coming up. That's one thing I want to say specifically about a question that he asked.
Yeah, okay, let me keep going now. AVRant's supposed to be about audio and video topics, and it should be fun. He's not into our other hobbies that we frequently mention, and he's fine hearing about those. Wait a second. He's not into fine. Our other hobbies.
He's not into them, but he's fine hearing about them. Yeah.
Okay. But not our same old grievances every single show. He doesn't think it adds anything positive, and it's kind of a downer. I agree.
That, yeah, I can see where you're coming from there. Yeah.
So could we put in inserts after we are done recording to let listeners know when they can skip, where they can skip to in the episode to get past all the negativity?
Yeah, we got the timestamps.
Dude, how many times do I have to mention
and
the show notes?
Even if it's like, because I totally get, okay, I'm just someone who automatically downloads my podcast episodes. I play them out of a playlist. So I'm not going to the website. I'm not doing it on YouTube. But whatever player you're using to play back the podcast, you can access the show notes there, which have the timestamps in it. So that one, because I mean, look, re-recording a thing after I figured out the timing thing and putting it in audio-wise, I'm like, that is... Even though I grant you it's not a gazillion times of more work, but it's like it's some amount of extra work, and I'm just not going to do it because I already put the timestamps in there. So that one I'm going to throw back on you, that you can just check the show notes and click the timestamp, and that's not, I don't think, actually asking too much on that end of things. But yeah, no, Tom and I, we both get where you're coming from. And look, there's some other podcasts that I listen to where I continue to listen to them and subscribe to them because overall, on the whole, I like them more than I dislike them. But there's some things that bug me about whatever I'm listening to.
Sure.
You know what? It's going to happen. It's going to happen. That's why I said keep in mind what Ilango said earlier, because he's like, I'm actually enjoying these kind of off-topic rants. I'm finding them, humorous and stuff like that. So it's like, well, we're going to hear from either side no matter what we do.
Sure.
So there's no.
So we're going to do whatever the hell we want, is what it comes to.
But that's the other thing. Like, we don't charge any money for this, but we love the people who support us on Patreon or send us a PayPal donation. But it's for us, we don't have any sort of paywall. Like, anybody who doesn't want to pay a single penny to us, they can hear all of the podcasts. We don't put a portion of the podcast behind a paywall.
That's right.
And I'm not criticizing anybody who does. Okay, that's not what I mean by that. I'm just saying that.
But we don't.
Yeah, I'm just saying that, if to lay some criticism on our podcast, I'm like, I am going to say, well, it doesn't cost anything. So it's kind of hard to say I'm not getting my money's worth. But yeah, I mean, it's like, I get it. I get it that you're like, I've heard from more than one person that they don't like my laugh and they wish I would stop laughing so much because they just...
Are you kidding me?
Oh,
is that real?
Oh yeah, that's absolutely real.
I will punch that person in the face.
Ooh, I just laughed. Sorry for that.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Rob's laugh is adorable.
Oh,
it is It is it's like chimes in the winter. It is a baby's giggle. You anybody that does not like Rob's laugh is not it's not a human.
There are,
I don't know.
There are people who, distinctly, and it's not just the same person more than once. It has been more than one person. So, but I'm like, well,
Go
I'm
to
sorry.
YouTube and look at my face. Go to YouTube and look at my face. I am shocked. I am aghast right now.
But
are you kidding me?
A little bit more seriously on the, like complaining about social media and the state of the world and stuff. One of the reasons that I do include that, a couple of reasons. One, I like to sometimes go back to our own podcast. I am one of the hosts who I do listen back to the podcast that we make, even though I was here recording it, because I don't remember everything I said, and I don't remember everything that Tom said. And I also like to get a sense of, well, what is it like to listen to AVRant? Because there are things that I want to improve upon, and interstitial sounds that I'm like, oh, that's an annoying habit. The people who say, before every single word that they say, if I do something like that, I want to hear it back and correct myself to the extent that I'm able to, those sorts of things. But I also like to just sort of have a sense of, well, when did this episode occur?
Right.
There's a little bit of
context,
historical context. And I think I do make a point of mentioning sometimes when I think like it's going to have an impact on our emotional response, or if we seem distracted, something like that, I kind of like having that explanation, being like, oh yeah, that's what was going on in the world at the time. But the other side of it is, I want things to get better. I want things to get better. I don't like a ton of what's going on right now, so it's going to come out as a complaint, unfortunately. If things get markedly better, you're going to hear it be a whole lot more positive from Rob H on this podcast.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think so. You're the Canadian. I'm supposed to complain. I think maybe that's the problem, is I'm a bad influence.
No, I mean, that's just where a lot of it comes from. I want things to get better. I want social media to be more fun and not be so harassment-based. I don't like that. Who likes that it's so harassment-based? I don't know, but here I am complaining again about it. But also, it is crossover, right? Because I mean, broadly speaking, we are a technology podcast. So then, like, things can't help but branch into streaming services, which then branch into social media, which branches into these massive, massive companies that own everything now, right? And everything's conglomerating and merging. It's like, it's hard to completely separate. Oh, audio, video only. It's like that whole Good Place thing of like, you can't buy an Apple without it having an impact on someone halfway around the world. It wasn't your intention.
The owner of X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it these days is currently the president of the United States. So there you go.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Things are connected. They have an influence on each other. So yeah, but by and large, it's what Tom said. Tom and I are two friends talking. This is when we talk during the week, and some of it is just going to be two guys talking. And if you want to skip past all that, which I totally get, there are other podcasts.
I'm okay with that. I think I would skip past it. I'll be honest with you. I think I would.
I'm like, I get what you're saying. Could we just go back in afterwards and put an audio description of when to skip to? But I'm like, that's a little bit more work for me. Sorry, I'm not going to do it. Please just check the timestamps in the written part of the description.
To sign up for Patreon and make a large monthly donation every month for Rob to do that, and I will make sure that he gets all of that.
It's not the money, it's the time. So I don't know if somebody else wants to do it and release their own version of AVRant that has that injected into it, then feel free.
I suppose that could happen, yeah. I just I in my own life, I don't know what Rob's like outside of this podcast. I don't. Because we've never really hung out. We've never seen each other in person. We don't have any idea what any of that is. But I am just me on this podcast as much as I can be. And I am polarizing in real life. Like there's very few people just think I'm just okay. Like, oh yeah, that guy, he's all right. Very rarely do I get that comment from people. I hate him, or I love them. Okay. There is no, and I don't do it on purpose. It's just it's inevitable. So either you're gonna think that I'm witty and you like my sarcasm and you like the jokes I make, and you think that my personality is something that rubs you the right way, or you're gonna wish that I die in the heat death of the universe, that I get thrown into a black hole.
Well, we're all going to die in the heat death of the universe. None of us is making it past that.
Yeah. So you want it to happen sooner rather than later. You your life would be made better by never having seen me again. And I don't love that about myself. I don't. I am not. It's not something I relish. It's not something that I do on purpose. It just sort of happens, and it's happened enough that I realize that I can't do anything about it. I know that sounds like, oh well, he's just, he's one of these guys who's like honest to the point of hurting people, and therefore people don't like him. If they can't handle his honesty, then blah blah blah. Because that's a lot of guys right now, or that's what they kind of lean into, especially guys who are my age. And I'm not. I very strongly try to temper myself and to make sure that I'm because my wife is lovely. Mm-hmm. My wife is a lovely person. Like, you can count. You do not need a full hand to count the people that actively dislike my wife. Like, she is. I remember in our relationship, there has been, I think, maybe 2 people who have actively disliked my wife. And she was so flummoxed by the experience that she was like, I was like, they're terrible people. Like, that's why they don't like you. Because they are terrible people. They are miserable people who can't like you because you are the exact opposite of that. My wife is, I do not deserve my wife. That is,
the good news
no one who's ever met us has ever said, oh yeah, he got what he deserved in this marriage. Everybody's like, she really settled. She settled. And I am what she settled for. I know that.
I've talked to you on this podcast now for like a decade or plus, and like, your wife has rubbed off on you in that time.
She has.
I think even I have had an influence on you in that time. And
you keep telling yourself that, Rob. I think that's a good thing for you to say to yourself.
Well, you've had an influence on me too, so it goes back.
Well, I'm sorry about that, Rob.
The very simple answer to everything, because I mean, what I will want to say to Jim specifically, and anyone else who has a similar gripe, or a different gripe for that matter, the chances of Tom and I honestly changing our approach on this podcast at this point, like to a significant degree, really, really low. I'm sorry that you don't like some portion of it or all of it. Or I mean, if you didn't like all of it, you wouldn't listen at all. But some portion of it, it's like, when it's something that we really, really take to heart, and we're like, oh, we should make an effort to really change that. But absolutely. This particular thing, I'm like, I don't think it's that bad. I think the time stamps exist. I think this is us, and this isn't one I'm going to make a huge effort to change. I don't think I'm crazy negative and cynical on this podcast, but to some degree I will be. But you know what? It would be kind of dishonest for me to not say any of it. And I also feel like I'm a citizen of the world. With something's really, really bad, I don't want to be I just truly didn't say anything about it type of person. So, yeah.
Well, it's not like during the Olympics I wasn't like super hyped about what I was watching and things that were going on there. And then, I mean, I don't always bring the negative. And even though this week the 14 hours that TikTok was down was the blackest moment of my life for the someday we will get into my love of TikTok and how it was pushed upon me, foisted upon me, and I went into it with all the resistance that you can muster from a Gen Xer, and it won me over. And
I have
someday we'll talk about it.
Not trained my TikTok algorithm, because I can't stand anything that it shows me right now, and I can't be on there long enough to make the algorithm any better for me. So, yeah.
I can help you, Rob. You can have my algorithm. My algorithm is great. I have my wife and my cycling partner both hate pickles.
Okay.
And why is that important? Because somehow I got on Pickle Talk, and it is just, there's this one dude who makes these machines that make pickles go around, and I just keep sending out these TikToks to my wife. She's like, it's gross, stop doing it. I'm like, nope, it's pickles. Scott is trying to help his cousin. His cousin used to have a 2.1 set up in his bedroom. He just wanted it as an improvement over his TV's built-in speakers and to be able to play either music from his computer or via Bluetooth from his phone. He didn't want to spend much money, so he put together a bunch of hand-me-down items, an old Sony receiver, a pair of energy speakers, and a 12-inch ported Klipsch sub. Welcome to how we all started in this hobby. This is how we all have lost a lot of money. Okay, because we wanted to keep it cheap to begin with. The energy speakers were never any good, so he ended up throwing those away. That's weird, but I suppose
they might have literally not worked properly, because and most energy speakers were pretty darn decent. Yeah.
He always found the Sony receiver too big for his desk, which I can understand, which is the only place he could put it, and so that's gone now too as well. He's held on to the subwoofer, even though it isn't being used right now, and he's back to just the TV's built-in speakers. He reached out to Scott to ask for a soundbar suggestion. That's what he wants, but he doesn't want to spend more than $400. Well, the Nakamichi is out.
It is.
He doesn't want to spend more than $400, and he wants to make use of his Klipsch sub, so he wants the soundbar to have an RCA sub output. Scott looked around, and the only soundbar models he could find that fit the criteria are the Denon DHT S217 and S218. Scott started wondering if his cousin would be better off with a small Fosse 2.1 amp plus a pair of flat on-wall speakers, but getting all that for around $400 is proving a bit challenging too. So we have recommendations or alternatives that he can tell his cousin to buy. I do like the idea of not necessarily flat on-wall speakers, but of a Fosse amp, because he's already kind of used to this idea of a receiver, and if you could make it all smaller for him, you know what I mean, with a couple of small bookshelf speakers. But even things like the what am I thinking of? The Fluence.
Yeah.
Self-powered speakers, they're bigger than he's wanting.
Yeah.
But the Fluence self-powered speakers do have a subwoofer output.
That's right.
Is RCA. And you don't have to buy an amp, and you plug it directly into your TV or to whatever your sources are.
Yeah, you can have optical from your
Bluetooth.
Yeah, optical from your TV, Bluetooth from your phone, and maybe it's just like RCA for the computer or something along those lines, because
it's a headphone. I think it's like a headphone.
Yeah, two channel only. So there are three different inputs. There's the optical, there's the analog 2-channel, and there's Bluetooth. So yeah, that could work, and they have an actual subwoofer output. So yeah, self-powered speakers, definitely potentially an option. I was in this particular instance, and I'm making assumptions here for sure, but I was kind of like, once somebody is asking in this way and they have soundbar form factor in their head, it can be difficult to convince them to get away from that. So I was just like, are there any subwoofers I could point, or soundbars rather, I could point you to that do fit these criteria? And honestly, I think the easiest one here is Klipsch. He already has a Klipsch subwoofer, and Klipsch's own Flexus Core series of soundbars. There's the Flexus Core 100, which is only a 2-channel soundbar. That's all it's got, is 2-channel soundbar. It actually has Atmos virtualization up mixing in it, which is kind of ridiculous, but it's a 2-channel soundbar as far as the actual drivers that are inside of it. $350 is the MSRP. You can definitely find it for $299 or lower at quite a few places. That's the Flexus Core 100. The better performing one, because it actually has left, center, right physical drivers, and I prefer that when I'm getting a soundbar. The Flexus Core 200, which is a $500 MSRP, but again, you can find it on sale. So the thing is, both of those Flexus Core from Klipsch soundbars have a subwoofer out jack that can go to one of their own Klipsch subwoofers. So I'm like, it's Klipsch and Klipsch, it's soundbar form factor. There's one that definitely fits the price point. There's another one that I do think is considerably better sounding. MSRP is above the desired price point, but if you can find it on sale. Another soundbar option, this is probably my favorite soundbar option to point people to right now, is the JBL Bar 500, but that one does not have the subwoofer out jack. That would come with its own 10-inch sub, which is among soundbars one of the better subs that comes packaged in. It's $600 MSRP, but it was on sale at Crutchfield for $400 like a week ago, and now that sale has ended. But it's not out of the question to find it for $400 all in. He could sell the Klipsch sub that he has, recoup some of that money. It was an idea, but I'm like, I'm betting you, if you just tell your cousin, hey, there's Klipsch soundbars that have the subwoofer out jack, he'll be like, ooh, I already have a Klipsch sub. It's the form factor he wants. It does all the things he wants. There's definitely one that can fit the price. I think that's maybe the easiest.
Maybe. So yeah, the Fluence A1 AI, this was released before AI.
It was, yeah.
AI 41 powered bookshelf speakers. I put the link for my review in there.
Yeah.
Those are like $250 at Amazon right now, not on sale.
Yeah. So, there's some Kanto desktop style speakers as well that similarly have capabilities. So yeah, if he is okay with, bookshelf sized speakers, self-powered, That is certainly an option. But if he really just wants the soundbar form factor, we have the options there too.
Yeah, those are Bluetooth. It's got regular RCA inputs from your computer or from something else, optical, and it's got a subwoofer output. Yeah. So, let me see. What are they right there? They're almost a foot tall and 7.5 inches deep.
Yeah, so they're not tiny. They're not going to go under the TV. But they have some nice finish options, those Fluences too. So they don't just have to be black. Black is an option.
And they're cheap. Yeah. They're like almost half as budget.
And they sound good. So, that's the main thing. They sound good.
Yeah. Brad. So Brad sent in a this or that question with a bunch of numbers attached to his scenarios. Let's try to sort through it. How long is this? I feel like it's... What is this?
Well, no. We should at least get through this.
We got more time. Sorry. It just feels like forever. I had to go do Peloton really early this morning because my friend's got a Peloton and she wants me to buy one and I don't want one. Mm-hmm. And so she said, come try it. And then I used her Peloton because she's little and I'm bigger and whatever, the FTP. I don't know how those numbers work. I kind of do. But basically, now I'm sore and I've been up for a long time. Scenario 1 is a 12-inch ported subwoofer in the front left corner plus two 10-inch ported subs stacked on top of each other in the right rear corner. What is this? What are we supposed to say?
I'm going by what he said in his email, so just keep in mind that's scenario number 1, okay? 12-inch ported sub, front left corner, two 10-inch ported subs stacked one on top of the other, rear right corner, diagonally opposite across the room.
All right, so scenario 2 is a 15-inch sub in the front left corner and another 15-inch sub in the front right corner.
Yeah.
He says to envision that the only difference is, I guess, is the driver cone size. So amplifier power and cabinet size are the same somehow. We're not really sure. I don't know what's going on with this question.
It was a vague email, man. That's why I say we're trying to make sense of it. Yeah.
And then imagine they're all playing at 90 hertz.
No, 90
dB at 18 hertz.
Yeah.
90 dB at 18 hertz. He wants to know which of his two scenarios would let him feel more infrasonics given all these numbers and positions. Let's have it. Well, you can't feel infrasonics.
Yeah.
So let's start with that.
Yeah.
Okay. I wrote an article and I will die on this damn hill. I'm not even joking. Yeah. So Rob pointed this out on this podcast, and then I wrote an article about it after having done a little research for it and all that other stuff. Elephants have been pumping out. They've been talking to each other through notes too low for us to hear, right? Below 20 hertz. Infrasonic notes.
Human infrasonic, below our
human infrasonic. They can hear them just fine.
They can hear them with their big elephant ears. It's kind of the reason they have them. Yeah.
And they're literally miles away from each other, and they can hear these things. And the people who work with elephants are like...
Standing right beside them.
Standing right there next to the damn elephant, and they're not hearing crap. And not only are they not hearing it, they're not feeling it.
That's right. They didn't know they were making those sounds.
Had no idea. Yeah. So I don't care how many subs you stack on top of these things or what their cone sign is. The answer to your question is none. It makes no difference. You will feel no infrasonics because you cannot feel them. So, okay.
Now, what has been demonstrated is... much like how you can have infrared light, literally heat waves, right? Infrared light that interacts with waves that are of shorter wavelength, visible light.
Yes.
And you can see the interference pattern that happens when you've got a whole bunch of infrared light interacting with the visible light spectrum. And this has been demonstrated where you can have infrasonic frequencies, single digit, 10 hertz, that type of thing. And you play them loud enough that they interact with some audible frequencies to create some audible beats, like infrared heat waves. That is a thing that can potentially happen. So this was not happening with the elephants because they weren't making prolonged sine wave type of infrasonic frequencies, right? If you're thinking about what are heat waves, it's like that's a continuous infrared radiation that's happening there, and that's why you can eventually see the interference pattern. If you were to just take a an infrared flashlight and do some little pulses of it, you'd never notice.
Your remote control
Yeah.
is sending out infrared beams every time you press
Harmony
a button.
hub that is bathing your room in infrared light, but it's pulses.
You never notice
It's pulses, so you never notice it. So, but if you had just a continuous, ongoing sine wave of 10 hertz at a really, really high decibel SPL, just going and going and going, then you could detect some of the interference that creates if there are also audible frequencies happening at the same time. That's part of it. So, okay, the crazy infrasonic bass heads, for some reason, they believe it's really important to be able to detect those interference patterns. I say if they're in the recording, it was completely unintentional because there is no studio that was purposely putting those in there. But okay, whatever, that's the justification they have for it. But I will tell you flat out, 90 decibels at 18 hertz ain't it. He specifically said 90 decibels, and that is not loud enough.
That is not as loud as you think it is, especially for bass that low.
You could have 18 hertz playing all day long, every day at 90 decibels in that room, and if that was actually clean, right? We're talking a clean 18 hertz. There's no harmonics that are coming along with it. There's no harmonic distortion that is audible up in the frequency rate, which, when people are talking about their infrasonic subs, what they're actually hearing are the harmonics or the distortion that's being caused by it.
That's right. But basically what they're hearing is noise.
Yeah.
You know, their driver is distorting. Something in the room is vibrating. You know, like Rob said, a harmonic.
It's a 36 hertz harmonic. You can hear that.
Yeah, you hear that just fine, right? But you're not hearing 18
but you could
hertz.
Have
you're hearing what 18 hertz creates.
Sure. You could have an 18 hertz sound wave, sine wave, just playing continuously all day, every day at 90 decibels, and you would never know it was there. So 90 decibels ain't it. You're just not getting it. And that was a specific number he gave in his email. So I'm going to put all of that aside, and I'm going to say he gave a clear scenario, two different ones. You got a single 12-inch sub front left corner, two stacked 10-inch subs in your rear right corner versus a pair of 15-inch subs, but they're both in the front left and right corners, I'm assuming, because there's some kind of physical placement restriction where the two smaller 10-inch subs stacked, they can physically fit in the rear right corner, and a single 15-inch just can't fit back there. It all depends, right? Because there are... What is the room size? Is the room enclosed? That is tremendously important here. I care about, and you know what? Even my caring about getting to 20 hertz is kind of ridiculous. The number of times 20 hertz is like actually important to whether or not you understand the story that you're watching. It's like pretty hard to argue that, but I'm going to be like, I care about getting to 20 hertz. 10-inch subs, there aren't a ton of 10-inch subs out there that are genuinely playing flat down to 20 hertz. That's a bit of a challenge.
I think his idea is because he just wants us to consider the driver size, right? That's the one thing. So is he? I think he's thinking, okay, so we forget, and it's hard for us to envision that when you increase the diameter of a circle, the amount of actual physical square inches of that circle increases way more than you think it's going to. Yeah. You think it's like you only put 2 inches on it, and now it's like you've doubled the actual.
It's the pizza slice thing, right?
Yeah. So that I think that's kind of what he's getting towards here with this. I'm wondering if he's like, do 10-inch two 10-inch subwoofers, since the driver size themselves kind of equal a 12-inch one. Does that mean that you're going to get? Would they play nice with each other? And and he's trying to keep everything else equal, as if that really can be done, which it can't. Of course, it can't in this case because the enclosures will be different.
The cabinet size thing is definitely changing. Yeah,
you can find lots of 12-inch ported subs that get down to 20 hertz. You find very few 10-inch ported subs. So you are limited by the Remember, stacking subs does not make them go any lower.
That's right.
It just makes them play louder.
That's right.
So you're still going to be limited in the extension, because anything below what the 10-inch subs can play, no matter how many you have stacked up in that corner,
Well, I guess you
the
could
12-inch is playing by itself.
I guess you could get to the point where, I mean, it's not as though the 10-inch subs are putting out 0 decibels at
That's
20
true.
hertz.
You could EQ the crap out of them.
Yeah, I guess you could get enough, and then you just have to really tamp down what they're doing at 50 hertz, so that.
Yes.
But yeah, it starts becoming impractical. So, on extrapolating a bit to a little bit more practical application of this, I'm like, well, if you have a footprint where a pair of stacked 10-inch ported subs could physically go, but a single 15-inch sub just physically won't fit in that rear right corner, I'm like, it's time for a cylinder sub. That's where we've gotten to, because you clearly have the footprint, right? Apparently the height is not a problem. You're going to stack 2 10-inch ported subs, so the height's not a problem. It's time for a cylinder sub, because I agree with you. It's like, yeah, if I'm limited to 10-inch subs, how many of those can give me really tactile, guttural 20 hertz performance? I'm forgetting about your 18 hertz figure. What can give me the 20 hertz tactile sensation? And it's a challenge. 10-inch subs is a challenge to find that. I would argue, like RSL's Speedwoofer 10S Mark II, it's going to come about the closest for a 10-inch sub of that sort of cabinet size that has some decent 20 hertz output, but it's not going to be sufficient for a large room. If you want, cinema volumes, we don't know what the room. He didn't tell us what the room size is. We don't know. But I'm assuming there's some physical limitations because a 15-inch sub doesn't fit in the rear right corner. I'm extrapolating. Right. So I'm going to say that
makes me think it's small, but that doesn't mean it's enclosed.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm going to be like, okay, so practically speaking, it's like, I think cylinder sub is your friend here. I do want the diagonal placement as opposed to both subs in the 2 front corners of the room, because that is less likely to give you nice uniform bass performance. It's I suppose if you get super lucky, you have one in the front left corner, one in the front right corner. There's some rooms where that works out, or you only care about one seat and you can EQ it well enough for that one seat. Those are those scenarios, but you have a better chance of uniform bass across like a 3-seater couch if you have the diagonally opposite placement. But if the 10, and I agree, the 10-inch sub's a little bit of a concern if I want tactile 20 hertz output. So I'm going to say put a cylinder sub there and put your 12-inch ported sub in the front left corner, and I think that's your best scenario.
Yeah. Strange question. We'll do one more. Anonymous wrote us a couple of weeks ago when they weren't seeing the level of image contrast they were expecting when they recently upgraded an Epson 5050 UV projector. The room is light controlled and pretty close to its pitch black. At night, when Anonymous typically watches movies, they were still using their old 120-inch gray screen from daylight, with the projector about 13 feet from lens to screen. We said how it was a bit tough to know exactly how things look versus what Anonymous expectations had been. But we suggested that for HDR in particular, the Epson's 16-step slider can make a very noticeable difference. And then for SDR, it might be a matter of adjusting the gamma setting in particular, while of course making sure that the contrast and brightness settings are correct. So no real further questions on that front at this time, but Anonymous was also considering a screen size upgrade, and along with the change to the screen size, they were considering a change of screen material. So they just want to know, if they went to 135-inch screen size, would it be better to go with a plain white screen material, or should they stick with a gray screen material that they have now? And if they find a combination of settings that looks satisfying on the current 120-inch gray screen, can they feel confident that switching to a larger white screen material would be okay? Would it maybe be wiser to stick with the same gray material so the settings on the projector don't have to change? You already changed them. I would not. There's no world in which I'm going to tell you to get a gray screen. Let's just start with that.
With an Epson 5050 UB, you really shouldn't have to in a light-controlled room, which we do know that you have.
Yes. There's no world in which I'm going to tell you to do that. So yes, you're going to have to buckle up, Buttercup, and redo your settings a little bit. It's not, you did it once, you can do it again. You've already been through the whole process. It's going to be similar. You're going to look at this, the same things that you looked at before. You'll look at them again, and it won't be that bad. And you'll do it once and it'll be done. So the gray screen is really, it's one of those things where I'm like, I kind of wish they never invented them, because yes, they do have a use. Yes, they are useful at times. I'm not going to say that's not the case, but it's like, people have just decided that they need to have these screens because of somebody. The first piece of information they got about gray screens is that it makes black levels better.
Sure.
They're like, well, I want to have good black levels, so I got to have a gray screen.
We remember the early generation DLP projectors, the early generation LCD projectors. They were a huge deal because when those came out, like before that, we had like the triple Canon CRT projectors.
Yeah.
And like these new DLP and first generation, second generation LCD projectors, like the price was so much lower. The size was so much more manageable. The setup was so much easier that a ton of people were like, holy crow, I can put a projector in my room. But the black levels on those were atrocious. They were terrible, terrible. And people were like, is there anything I can do? And they're like, well, you can make the screen itself a darker shade. And now it looks a little bit better. But yeah, the Epson 5050 UB does not need the help of a gray screen. And there's also the thing of like the screen that you had right now, 120 inches, but the daylight gray screen is like a 0.8 gain. So if you go to a 1.0 gain white screen, but it's larger, there's actually kind of very little difference in terms of lumens that are reflecting off of that screen and coming back to your eyes. The larger screen size and subsequent drop in light output from the projector to fill that larger screen size versus the going from the 0.8 gain to the 1.0 gain, that kind of balances out pretty.
It's actually hard to find. I mean, a lot of times it's hard to find a 1.0 anyway, so you're probably going to end up with a 1.1 or 1.2 whether you like it or not, because those are the least expensive ones.
Yeah.
And that's probably the direction you'll go. I don't know, but you know.
Well, they did mention Silver Ticket in the past, so yeah, that's going to be the case there.
Yeah. So that's 1.1, I think. Silver Ticket is 1.1 or 1.2.
Although I think when it was measured, it was like closer to 0.9 or 1.0 type of thing. But either way, go ahead, get white screen if you want to go to the larger screen size. I think we mentioned it before, but if it actually is exactly 13 feet from lens to screen, that actually isn't enough distance with a 5050 UV to do 135. You're going to have to make sure you have, I think it was 13 and a half feet from lens to screen is the shortest distance you could do for 135.
So maybe do 130. Why does it have to be 135?
Well, because that's a standard screen size that you can usually order. No custom order. Yeah. But no, go with the white screen. You'll be totally fine. You might need to adjust a little bit, right? Maybe there'll be a little bit of color correction or a slight difference in the contrast and brightness settings, but it's nothing you can't handle if you already did it on your current screen.
Yeah. All right, who do we have left?
Just Steve. That was it. And then we did have a number of questions that came in on Monday. I didn't write down all those names, but things have been received if you didn't hear your name there at the end. Not to worry.
All right, if you want to get your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 132 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Thank you very much.
That is right. Yeah, once again, that is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So a big thanks to our 132 patrons who have done just that.
We also want to thank Ilango for giving me permission to use his photos on AV Gadgets.
Thank you, Ilango.
And for the notes of gratitude we got from Bret, Infinite Gary, Henry, Scott, Ilango, and Anonymous. Thank you for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. I'll say the names one more time. Bret, Infinite Gary, Henry, Scott, Ilango, and Anonymous. Thank you very much for the notes of gratitude and encouragement. We appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.